call the Wednesday, August 14th, 2024 meeting in the Essex Junction City Council to order. Just going to read something briefly. In previous city council meetings, members of the public have made racist and anti-Semitic comments. These comments have disrupted presentations and were made during the public comment period. The city council does not condone such language and opposes it. Such comments are deeply harmful and are entirely inconsistent with our community's values. While it is not possible to prevent harmful speech during public comments, the council will continue to condemn such comments publicly. Are there any agenda additions or changes?
I would just like to note that consent agenda item 6D is spelled incorrectly. That should be Tyler Drive, not Taylor Drive. The documents within the packet itself are correct, but just the title on the agenda is wrong. And also just want to point out in the consent agenda, there was under the tobacco license for Dollar Plus Treasure, pending police department approval of that. We have now received police department approval of that.
I don't think we need to do anything with that, just to make the comment. All right,
Yeah.
So we'll move on to public to be heard. This is the portion of the meeting where members of the public can bring comments, concerns, questions to the board. These do not have to be items that are on the agenda, and they can be items that are on the agenda. I'm not seeing anybody with their hand up in the room right now, but I am seeing two people online. So Stephen, if you want to start. Welcome.
Sure, thank you. I had a couple topics to bring up. One is I've noticed on a couple years ago, one of the properties on both South and South Street started to not maintain the side of the grass on either side of the sidewalk, and now that's kind of been spreading. There's been at least 4 properties on South and West Street, which is a Class 2 road and very busy, so you need to use the sidewalks, that have not been maintaining their grass. 2 of them have recently mowed their section, which is great. We paid a lot of money to widen the sidewalk to 5 feet on these busy roads, including the West Street portion last year. The one property, you cannot walk on the sidewalk without brushing vegetation on you. With Lyme disease always a threat, you should be able to feel safe walking on city sidewalks without worrying about ticks. And I don't have a solution, but I think the city needs to do something, either to talk to the individual owners. And I'm all for, people, some people, even I myself, I leave some areas of my yard for pollinators and things like that, but I mow along the sidewalk so people can enjoy that public space. So that's one issue I'd like to bring up. The second issue is in my neighborhood specifically, Wilkinson, Hayden, and Tyler. And as you may or may not know, trees were mandated, street trees on both sides of the street were mandated by the Planning Commission. I went through all those hearings back in the mid-90s, and on one side of the street, there's no sidewalk, and so the trees are in the right-of-way, in the city right-of-way. On the other side of the street, because of the sidewalk, the trees are just beyond the right-of-way. But they're mandated, they're shown on the plats, the whole thing, for them to be there. The developer wasn't supposed to plant only ash, but that's what they did, and the city never took them to task for it. So with the ash borer, the city has decided that they're just going to take down and replace the trees when they're in the right of way, which is fine. I don't agree with it, but that's how the decision. And in light of transparency, and I know Tim has been big on this, and telling what happens at the city council meetings, which has been wonderful, and Front Porch Forum and elsewhere. But if the city has this position, I think they need to send a letter to every affected property that needs to cut down an ash tree, because it's their responsibility. People don't know. They keep asking me, hey, when is the city going to come? Because I'm a moderator, for whatever reason, people always ask me these kind of questions. But hey, when is the city going to cut down the tree on my property? And I'm like, no, you're on the sidewalk side, so you're responsible. And and people are surprised. And, some people have contacted the city offices, others aren't. And the danger with the ash borer is, I describe it as like Jenga, once the borer gets in there, the trees become brittle and it's dangerous to cut them down. So people need to know that they need to be proactive and cut their trees down before they get too far gone. We already got 2 dead trees on Hayden that have been dead all season. And I have to wonder, are they waiting for the city to come take them down? Or do they really know? And maybe there was something mentioned in a newsletter or some other communication. But I think we really need to, in the era of transparency and communication, I think there needs to be some outreach to this specific to the people so that everybody knows. Anyway, so that was that. And then thirdly, and this was quick, on West Street, near the church, there's a ton of very large dead trees on just like 1 or 2 properties, and a whole bunch of them are overhanging the road. And I don't know if there's anything to do about that, but it's like anytime I'm out and there's a storm, it's windy, I'm always worried, are some of these trees going to come down and hit me while I'm out driving? On my street last year, we had a tree come down that crushed a postal van. And the lady was lucky that she, wasn't hurt worse than she was. So these can cause significant harm. And some of these trees are big, and I don't know the whole story, if they're on the right of way or not on the right of way, but they're hanging over the road, and I get worried about it. And so again, I wanted to bring it up, and I don't know what the policy is, but I thought I'd throw that out there.
Thanks, Steve. What street was that last one?
West Street near St. Lawrence Church.
Okay. Going back to your example from Hayden, you talked about some of the trees that aren't on the sidewalk side are in the right of way. And those are ash trees, and we haven't taken those down.
Correct. The tree committee's been awesome at planning ahead for things, and they've been taking out a certain amount of ash trees each year, and they can you can anticipate when they just start to get the borer, you can get them out of there and it's still safe. And they've been dealing with all the ones that are in the right of way, and none of those are, the ones in the right of way are not on the sidewalk side. When there's ash trees on the sidewalk side of the street, those are not in the right of way, and the city is not dealing with that. And I had some discussions with Regina, and which is fine. I mean, the city can decide what they want to do. All I'm asking is to communicate with people directly so that they know what their responsibility is.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep. And any other questions or?
I don't have any.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for giving me the chance to say all this.
Thanks, appreciate it. I can't see the rest of that screen.
Looks like Risa.
Risa.
Thank you. I could hear Steve very loud and clear. Raj, I can barely hear you in the room. And I see Amber shaking her head, so it's definitely not just me. Thank you.
Thanks. How about now? No, it's not me then.
Still, I'm really struggling to hear you.
That's a feature, not a bug.
Good try.
People in my house are clapping right now.
Now I can hear you
That's
clearly.
better.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
All right, we got it. Good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan.
Sorry? Yes. Genevieve?
I think looks like you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm mainly joining to voice my opposition to the Champlain Valley buildings paying for the grandstand by having basically what I calculated would be a concert every other week. I am not convinced of bringing that much money to the town, to the city, and we have a lot of quality of life issues right now. The wonderful project that is being completed right now the Crescent connector is going to affect us a lot in my neighborhood. I live on Jackson Street. We don't need more quality of life issues. We are trying to transition to a place where everybody has a right to live, and not everybody likes noise. So my concern is, first it's going to be the grandstand, and then what else are they going to need to replace? If they can't make it there, that's really tough luck. When a business can't make it, they just leave. It's a good place. It's a great place for people who like to do the fair. But I don't think we should ask us to pay for the grandstand. I do, unless I see some really solid numbers regarding how much they bring to the city, I'm just going to take a very cold look at it. My other concern is that because of where they're located, they're going to be affecting a lot people who live in buildings along Pearl Street. I think it's going to affect more the have-nots than the haves. It's the haves who want those things. And I think we are going straight towards building a city that has some amenities, but will be more friendly to people with money. So I think we need to be very careful with that. Traffic-wise, I don't need to tell you. You know, the big giant failure that the Crescent connector is going to be, believe me, we'll see that in September and October. But sometimes it's like that. We add more cars, we add more parkings. And basically, I bike and walk every day. It's gotten more and more difficult, especially right now that there's no signage yet. All I can say is it used to be a really great place to live near the village, but now it's not that great. And looking for another house, well, that's pretty much out of the question right now in Vermont. So people are stuck here. People who came here because it was quiet, because they want a good education for the children. What is going to happen when all these buildings are getting older by 10 years? I have the example of the building that has been built right next to the dollar store. I give it 10 years because it starts falling apart. So that's all I have to say, but I'm very disappointed with the direction this is taking. In the vibrant that we want, we forget about everybody. We shouldn't just serve the ones that have the biggest voice. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. Thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve. Is there anyone? Cristin.
Hey, everybody. Okay, so in the spirit of transparency and communication, there was some confusion around the signage ordinances and the enforcement of those, and the implications and impact that that has around elections. There are people that are looking at those ordinances and following them as they are written and following the rules of those ordinances because they're looking them up and respecting how they're written. And then there's other people that, for whatever reason, either were given permission or were told it's okay to not follow them, or there's a silent pause on putting up signs that not everybody that had their own signs to put up during an election was told about. So some candidates are putting up signs thinking they're in the clear, and some are not putting up signs because they don't know that they could. And as everybody knows, when you're going in elected office, letting people know that you're on the ballot is a really difficult charge. And it costs a lot of money and a lot of time and effort. So I love that there's some candidates that respect the ordinance as it's written, that they're not supposed to be specifically in the right of way at any time. That's how it was understood. So if that's not the case, or if that's not how it's understood, maybe during the general, we can clarify or have communication put out so that all candidates are on the same page when it comes to signage. And then since I have you on the line, I know I've emailed before, I am concerned about CVE and what we're getting from CVE in this deal of waiving another ordinance. Connected to that, the reason I'm concerned is I really would love to charge all of you and challenge you all to really clarify the identity of this city and who we want to be, and make sure that our ordinances, our goals, our waivers align with that, because we seem a little disconnected from the inclusive community, walkable, strong identity that we started talking about. And it just seems like, trying to choose my words nicely, instead of being an independent identity of Essex, city of Essex Junction, we are the connection point of the state from one point to another of traffic. We are we have the event center of the state. We have to solve the housing crisis. Like, we're not thinking about what our part is and what our identity is in that as a city, because every city has a part to play in that. What part is our part to make a thriving community that aligns with who we want to be? Because we can only do so much. And I hope that when we clear up who we want to be, then we'll kind of know where those boundaries are of what we can take on and what other people need to kind of give back to us as well and have a partnership. Thank you so much for listening. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Let's see. I do not see anyone else in the room. I don't see any other hands online. So we will move on to the first business item, 5A, discussion and consideration of appointment of Cristin Gildea to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. Cristin, can you come up to the little table closest to the camera, but don't notice it. It's fine.
Hello. You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks for putting your name forward for this. I understood you attended a meeting or two
Yeah.
and are interested, understand the charge.
Yep.
Is there,
I listened in to the July meeting, thanks to Elaine, thank you. It was fascinating. I think some of what has been talked about from some of the neighbors is would love to represent the city on this committee, and really just listen to what the other towns are dealing with. I mean, I think it's kind of like a puzzle. We all have to work together on a lot of the things that are happening, like housing, climate change, the revisions to Act 250. They're happening to all of us. So it's great to kind of see how the city of Essex Junction fits into that bigger pie. And then my work on the DRB, will be sort of a really good to kind of play them against each other and sort of see how the projects that we're getting and what other towns are getting. The transportation piece is a big piece. The group really loves their work, and you can tell. So it's, I'm obviously a novice, and I don't have all, I'm really just listening, but I feel like what I've learned from the DRB and just listening in, these are really big problems that we're all dealing with. And so if I can sit in and help and learn and share, I don't know how, if I'll report back to the council, that was the one piece, or share with Regina, just kind of being the ears for the city and being able to kind of share and see how we fit in and what we can learn and what we can maybe provide to other folks. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate your DRB position in addition to having this role, and how those two will play. The communicate back is something we've been talking about.
Yeah.
We've all identified that as a little bit of a weak spot for some of
Yeah.
these boards. And this week, we sort of addressed that a little bit, I think. We got a lot further with, we now include in our meeting packets, the links and information from all the different boards, so
Yeah.
we can keep up. But I
That's
think
great.
coming up, long-term, coming up with a way to have these board members like you visit
Yeah, yeah.
for check-ins once or twice a year.
I mean, the meeting that I sat in on, it was about culverts. I mean, the flooding had just happened for a second time, so just hearing all of the, I mean, for the most part, we're very lucky compared to what some of the other towns are going through. So to have a group that's sort of all coming together and there's a representative from every town in this area is really interesting. And you can see like what, it was culverts. It was all about culverts, which are hugely important. So it just was, it was really interesting to hear. And then housing, and everybody is dealing with housing, and some towns are doing really interesting things and handling it in different ways. And I feel like we're kind of at the beginning of that. So it's sort of nice to hear what other towns have done. Like everyone's at a different stage.
Mhm.
And so you can really kind of see how we fit in. So, anyway.
Great. Elaine, do you have any
No,
questions or comments? Sorry.
Cristin and I have been, we've talked a lot about
Yeah,
it.
yep.
But I had invited her to,
Oh,
this is
yeah.
supposed to be mine?
Yeah.
There you go.
Microphone.
We've talked a lot about it, and we have, I shared with her my impressions of CCRPC. I've been involved with it over many years, so I'm happy to pass the flag on to someone also who is part of the DRB. I used to be a planning commissioner, so it felt like a great fit. CCRPC is doing incredibly important work, not just in transportation and housing and development, but also in equity across the county. And I was really deeply involved in that for quite some time, so I'm really happy to be able to hand it off to someone who is equally as enthusiastic about it as I have been. So,
Excellent.
yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
I just want to say that I'm in total support of this. The work that I've observed with you on the DRB and working with you on the Strategic Planning Committee, I think you're a great fit for this. I think you, in just what you just shared, it's a great point of view, and I really appreciate the fact that you have that look at it. And so thank you so much for putting yourself forward for this.
I'm happy to.
Amber, anything? Tim?
No.
Great.
I feel like there's been said.
All right, and not to be rude, but in the interest of a very long meeting tonight, I will, unless you have anything else you want to add, or Regina,
Nope.
anything?
Nope.
I don't have anything.
Okay.
Cristin has her hand up, and I didn't
I think
notice
that's
if it was
left
still.
over from
Okay.
earlier.
Yep, it hasn't gone down yet.
Yeah.
Well, I'll move the council appoint Cristin Gildea to the remaining term in the CCRPC board, which expires in June 2025.
I'll second.
Great.
Without further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Great, thank you, Cristin.
Great.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much,
Thank you.
Cristin.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
All right, business item 5B, presentation on the Crescent connector tutorial, Rick Hamlin. Come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let's talk about the Crescent connector. Before I dive into details, a little history probably would be helpful since this is labeled a tutorial. We're in 2024. Design of the project started in 2011, so there's 13 years have passed. And if you count the scoping study and preliminary and concepts, we're probably looking more like 15 years. And now we're within a month of finishing the project. The project was actually two stages, phase 1 and phase 2. We're in Crescent Connector phase 2 now. Phase 1 was the reconstruction of all of the railroad crossings within the city limits. that included South Summit Street, 2 crossings on Park, the crossing on Maple, the crossing on Main, and the crossing on Central. And just before that, the crossing at North was also rehabbed. That crossing work included all new concrete panels, all new signal equipment, and the capability of interconnection with our new traffic signal systems that'll be installed as a part of Phase 2. So that was 2 construction seasons ago. Phase 2 started last construction season. As I say, we're within 30 days of the completion date of the contractor for Phase 2. So it's been a long time, and we're all looking forward to having it complete. Probably the best thing to do is talk about some of the things that are will change because of the Crescent connector. And let's start on Park Street. As a part of the Crescent connector, there's going to be a new signalized intersection at the intersection of the new roadway. So we're right here. So here's the new alignment of the Crescent connector. That alignment picks up Railroad Street, traditional Railroad Street, that has all been reconstructed as a part of the project. So the Crescent connector is referred to from Park across Maple to Main. So if we start here at Park, one of the things that is going to change, obviously will be very visible, is the new signalized intersection to accommodate the traffic that comes in and out of our new roadway system. As a part of that, there's going to be a long distance queue detector that will actually look back to the 5 corners. And as you may be aware, oftentimes Park Street will get choked with traffic due to either mistiming of signals or whatever the situation is. That queue detector will determine when vehicles start to back up into the 5 corners, and it will allow everything southbound to open up and go. So it'll turn that intersection green, Iroquois green, and allow everything to go southbound, and it'll stop the northbound traffic. So if it's a conflicting move, those folks can make the turn and get out of the way to clear Park Street. So that'll be something that won't be evident. It won't be really visible, but it's a feature of the system that will be new. The diagonal parking spaces that did exist on the 34 Park side of the street now will be a right turn lane that will allow traffic to free right into the Crescent connector. One of the benefits of this new configuration is that if the chip train or any freight is actually on the Burlington subdivision, which is this track, vehicles can still pass through and go from Park to Main Street while that train is occupying the tracks. So we've got an additional route for safety reasons if something should happen to be able to circumnavigate around the track system through the new crossing. As we work our way down the Crescent connector, obviously we've got a new railroad crossing. That was one of the first steps of the project to get concurrence from the railroad. They were a little reluctant to start, i.e. you'll never cross our tracks ever again. But eventually we got them to allow us to cross their tracks. As we pass through the area that now is essentially the forecourt for the Bailey Spring and Chassis operation, the roadway swings toward Maple. And in that stretch, after you cross the tracks, immediately on your left will be a new municipal parking area. That municipal parking area will have a 2-station EV charger. It will have bike boxes that'll accommodate 10 boxes, 10 bicycles, and then also a freestanding bike rack near those bike boxes. In addition, there'll be approximately 10 parking spaces over by the Two Brothers Furniture that will also be signed for municipal parking. And so we've got quite a bit of new downtown core parking in this area that helps to replace some of the parking that was lost on Park Street. Throughout the whole length of the Crescent connector, we'll have bike lanes, dedicated bike lanes, 4 foot on both sides. So this will be paved, curbed roadway, and there's also a sidewalk that will connect from Park all the way to Maple, and then from Maple to Main. So we'll have off-road pedestrian accommodations, on-road bike accommodations, plus the 2 traffic travel lanes. As we get to Maple Street, a new signalized intersection at Maple Street, and again, to control the traffic flow at that intersection. And then one of the changes in terms of lane configuration, currently on Maple, if you're heading toward the 5 corners and wanting to turn on Park, there's a left turn lane that's available at the 5 corners to make that move. That lane has been moved back to the Maple Street, Railroad Street intersection. And so now if you want to go from Maple toward Williston, or south on 2A, you'll make the left at the Crescent connector, come up, and then make the left onto Park at the other signalized intersection. What that allows us to do is 2 things. One is, for the first time ever, the bicycle lanes on Maple Street will go all the way to the 5 corners. As you may know now, the bike lanes terminated at Railroad Street, and then cyclists would have to take a lane to get through the 5 corners, and now there'll be accommodations all the way to and from the 5 corners, all the way out to where the bike lanes end past the Park. So that'll be a big change in terms of access for cyclists. Railroad Street configuration stays pretty much the same. It's been widened a little bit, but one of the things you'll notice throughout the Crescent connector, the new roadway and the old, is all new lighting. So there'll be street lighting that matches the historic style, the fluted cast iron poles and the multi-segmented head lights, all light emitting diode lamps, but they all will match the rest of the lights that have been installed within the city over the last 15 or 20 years now. So that'll make quite a difference in terms of the appearance of both Railroad Street historic and Railroad Street new, in terms of the downtown. I think that probably in terms of the lane configurations, those 2 changes mainly on Park and then on Maple are probably the 2 biggest differences in terms of how traffic will maneuver. And obviously now we've got this new connection between Park Street and Main Street via the Maple Street intersection that'll allow people northbound and southbound to avoid the 5 corners if they're going between 2A and 15. So that's the big overview. And as I say, the contractor's completion date is September 18th right now. And that may move a little bit. We've got one more change order to process, and that may add a day or 2. But certainly by the end of September, everything will be up and running. The current plan is to finish paving the new roadway and Park Street next week and do the striping. As soon as the striping is completed, the signal systems will start to come online. And you'll know we're almost there. Both the Maple Street and the Park Street intersection lights will flash for 48 hours before we go into cycle and a 30-day signal test period for the signals. All of the signals now will be interconnected. Maple Street, Park Street, Iroquois, South Street will all be connected through the master controller at the 5 corners, and also interconnected with the railroad. So there's quite a bit of interconnect and complication. All of the equipment has been bench tested. It's all been run, all of the controllers. So the next step is now for us to for the contractor to put them up, start them running, and there definitely will be some adjustments during that 30-day test period when we go live with the traffic signals.
Alrighty. Elaine.
I have questions. One's a simple one. When you're making right turn onto the Crescent Connector, what is the name of that street? Or is it always going to be called the Crescent Connector?
It's Railroad Street. And
Okay, so it's all Railroad Street.
Yeah, somewhere along the line, it was decided that the new roadway would be Railroad Street, and so from Park to Main is all Railroad Street, is the way I understand it. Certainly, it's the city council could name it whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, if they wanted to name it something else. But for now, our understanding is the official name of that whole stretch is Railroad Street.
Okay, great. Now, the next question I have, so you're saying that when you're coming down Maple, and you can now turn left, well, you will be able to turn left onto the Crescent to go to Park Street. Are you saying that you will no longer be able to go straight and make a left turn onto Park at Five Corners?
That's correct. So there'll be one lane there that will allow a through or a right turn movement. There'll be no left allowed. So it'd be very similar to what Main Street is now, no left turn allowed into Maple. So it would be that same configuration.
Okay, so if you're a customer at one of the buildings on that space between Railroad Street and Five Corners, you're going to need to make a right and go onto the Crescent Connector or Railroad Street to get across
Yes.
2A.
Yeah, so if you're trying to access that, or you would turn right on Railroad Street and go to Main and go directly across.
Okay.
So if I was going to the Lincoln Inn, I would prefer to take the Railroad Street to the left, because now I'm going to turn right into the Lincoln Inn and not have to cross 3 lanes of traffic. If I was going to Boxcar Bakery, most likely I'd be walking or riding my bike on my own. But if I was driving, I would turn right onto traditional Railroad Street and then go straight through from Main to go there.
Okay.
So, or depending on the day, I might take the Crescent Connector because crossing the 1 lane of traffic on Park is going to be much easier than crossing the 3 lanes going like into the Lincoln Inn if you're coming the other direction.
Okay. So my last question is, you just gave us 7 different options for getting around there. How are we going to educate residents on how this works? Because that the no longer making a left off of Maple, that's huge.
Well, and I think the important part is that you still will make a left off of Maple. You'll just make it sooner.
Sooner,
You know,
sure.
1 block sooner. So it's not that you're prohibited from going left to Park. It's just that that action is going to happen sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And most likely, people will find that it's quicker because of the signal timing at Maple and the signal timing at Park versus waiting for a full cycle at the 5 Corners. And again, a lot of what will happen in that first 30 days in terms of the signal timing, we won't make any adjustments. The contractor won't make any adjustments till the end of that period, just because people will be getting used to, and people will reset how they get from point A to point B. The traffic engineers have predicted what will happen, and now we'll see if human nature follows the prediction. But I mean, we've often talked about the Crescent Connector as, if you think of the 5 Corners as a heart, and all the arteries that come into it, they're semi-clogged at certain times of the day, and the Crescent Connector is not going to turn our 5 Corners into an Olympic athlete heart. It's truly is a bypass. It's a coronary connection that will provide a separate route. And will it solve all of the problems of the 5 Corners? No, it won't. But it will give us an option, again, for safety purposes, should something happen on the railroad tracks, and also an alternate route, plus better accommodations for cyclists on our current roads and new accommodations to get folks, especially like if you're in the Indian Acres development, say, and you want to ride your bicycle no matter what age to the Maple Street Park. Now you no longer have to go through the 5 Corners. You have sidewalks all the way. You've got pedestrian accommodations through the signalized intersections. And these intersections, as are most of the intersections within the city, are exclusive pedestrian phase, which means when you push the button, all traffic stops. So it's unlike major cities where you cross with traffic. Within the city, if you push the button, everything stops, you cross, and have pedestrians have exclusive control of the intersection during that time. So this will open up certainly a better bicycle and pedestrian route for linking that portion of the city to the Maple Street Park through the new roadway. And I was just thinking about something else here. Anyway.
And I'll just add that this is essentially the kickoff of the education. So we're working on a press release, and we'll have lots of different ways of trying to get the information out as best as possible. And as we were trying to sort through that in the opening, we thought it'd be great for Rick to come and do this as a starting
Absolutely.
kickoff to help start to educate folks.
Amber, I see your hand up.
Rick, I might have missed this, but when you're talking about starting the traffic light and the traffic lights and the 30-day cycle, is that in roughly 30 days from now when the project is complete, then the traffic lights are in that 30-day window? So we're not talking about starting that in the near future, like in the next week or so.
No, definitely not, and definitely not
Okay.
during the fair. So,
Good point.
no, the lights can't come on until all of the line striping on the pavement and the directional signs are installed. And that paving and striping is scheduled to be next week. We've talked to the contractor about not doing anything within the city right of way that would have any impairment of traffic during the week of the fair. So we're looking at, I mean, they'll be starting, the 30-day trial period could start as late as the middle of September, as they're closing out the project, and then we run those signals in the 30-day trial period. So if the signals were turned on the final day of the contract for that 30 days, the contract would be considered substantially complete, and they would have met the timeline, and then we'd be in the 30-day test. So to answer your question, not right away, but soon on the horizon.
Okay. Thanks, Rick.
Marcus?
So a couple of quick things. First off, just to go a little further on Elaine's question, when we're talking about 5 corners and then no left, where is that signage going to be? How is it going to be laid out so that, because I'm almost less worried about residents who will have time and in order to kind of get used to this and adapt. I'm more thinking about those people who are traveling through our community or new to the community and are unfamiliar. So I'm curious about the signage and the light as to whether or not that light might change from a solid green to some direct arrow to, make it real visible that this is a straight only, no turn.
Well, it won't be a straight arrow because the turns will be allowed. You'll be able to go straight, or you'll have 2 choices to go right, whether it be Lincoln or Main. So it'll still be a green ball on that signal. The signage will be similar to Main Street. There'll definitely signage at the signal, and there'll be directional arrows for Route 2A that will be on signage on Maple Street before the Maple Street intersection. So your guidance will be, if you're looking for 2A South, turn left here.
Okay.
So there'll be, you'll notice a lot more signage that will be installed as a part of the project, and you'll start to see that signage installed actually starting next Monday. The sign contractor will be on site. So there'll be plenty of signage on Maple to warn people that this is where you want to go now if you're going south on 2A.
And then as far as this new piece of road, how does this get out to things like Waze and Google Maps and such, so that, again, those people who, once this comes online and people map to their destination, that it will use the appropriate roadway?
So we'll do that through the police department, and we've actually been doing that now. If you go on, and some of the map providers are faster responding than others, I have to say. But when the driveway to Bailey Spring and Chassis closed, and we reversed the flow to come off Park, the map folks, the guidance, the directional people actually provided new routes. So if you were going to 15 Maple, previously it would show you to go to Maple Street and down the driveway, and then the new form was to go to Park Street and come down the new roadway, which is really a driveway at that point because it didn't go through. But we'll do that through the police department.
Lastly, the new parking lot that's going in, is there going to be a barrier or fence between it and the Lincoln Inn parking lot? I know that my recollection is there's nothing there now. I don't know if with the new parking lot something will end up going in.
So there will be a new 6-foot high steel fence that's similar, if you recall, the fence that was between Railroad Street and the railroad. So single straight steel, black, kind of decorative ornamental fence. So there'll be a new fence that goes from Park Street to Maple and from Maple to Main that will be that style, only now 6 feet tall instead of 4, all along the railroad to separate everybody who's in that parking lot from railroad operations.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, because the railroad tracks would keep people from going from one to the other, wouldn't it?
You would
talking walking, or
you would think. I think somebody could, because again, if the Lincoln Inn parking lot is full, I could see somebody parking over here and then going across, and then I start to wonder whether or not there's safety issues.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Well, and certainly they can.
Or
They'll end
vice
up
versa.
walking down the sidewalk and around the corner and going to either one way or the other, most likely out to Maple.
Somebody's going to jump that fence.
Always a
Later in the evening.
always a
Yeah.
possibility that
Yeah.
someone will try to
Yeah.
climb the fence. But as I say, it'll be very pleasing looking, ornamental style, but of a size and a nature to discourage people from crossing the tracks, except at the places where we've got pedestrian accommodations.
Great, thank you.
I have nothing. I've followed this project from inception, basically, as it moved through, so it's been a long time. I'm excited to see it. I will be interested to see if human nature follows traffic engineering thought. I think traffic engineers gets bad rap. They're the only ones that are always automatically wrong. But I'm excited for it, so.
And you will all have a role once the project starts. There's one last step in our project milestones that needs to take place, and that's as a part of the project, there was a corrective action plan because there were some contaminated soils. Anytime we're working near the railroad, there are contaminated soils. And so there's an ordinance that's been drafted that will need to be adopted to warn people who in the future, generations down the way, if they disturb soil within this area, to warn them that they may be experiencing or digging into some contaminated soils. All those soils have been capped. All those soils actually have an orange barrier. So if anybody digs in the future, they know exactly where that is. But that'll be one of the last steps of the project, is to enact that ordinance and file it in the land records. So.
Great. Thank you. Regina, do you have anything else to?
Can I just raise one more
Sure.
question? I'm sorry. I emailed everyone about this earlier today, but I promised a resident that I met at the polls yesterday to ask you to address, I guess, a appearance issue with.
It's on our punch list.
Great.
It's
Okay.
gonna- it'll be
trimming
taken-
off that plastic
it'll
along
be-
the brick. Yeah.
It'll be all, so right now we're in a punch list phase, which is all the little details. We've got a kind of a saying that the last 10% of a project takes 90% of the time. And that's all the details of cleaning up, taking any of the stray concrete off sidewalks and footprints and handprints, and painting the poles that have been marked during construction or damaged anyway. So, yeah, that final detail is one of the things on our punch list, so.
Thanks.
Sorry, I was trying to get Jordan. Folks online can't hear Tim. Sorry.
Wasn't anything important.
Rick, thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate all the
Thank
work,
you.
appreciate the
Yeah, thank you for taking
communication.
the time to
If
get
you have any
down.
questions, and if we send out an email daily, so since
Yep.
the beginning of this project, if somebody wants to get on that email list to find out what's going on, even though we're getting close to the end, they go to the city website, the email address, just send us a request. We're happy to add you. We send out about 210 separate addresses every single day now
Yep.
to let people know what's going on. So happy to add more to the list. So
Great.
let us know.
I think
you.
I was a village trustee when this was like a drawing on a napkin. And really, thank you. And the entire Public Works Department, all the engineers, everybody who has done this. It's been a huge dream of ours to have this road. And we're so excited that it's
Soon.
almost done.
Soon. We're almost there.
Thank you, Rick.
We will be doing a ceremony of sorts where we're
Oh,
working
okay.
on
Big
that, so.
scissors.
Big scissors.
Gigantic scissors, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Roger.
Oh, I'm so excited. Great. You are up. Presentation and discussion of Global Foundries electric battery storage projects, Essex VT BESS.
So I'm gonna get the presentation up for them so they can
Sure.
move through it, but, and introduce themselves, but just as a brief overview, these kinds of projects get approved by the State Public Utility Commission. So the city doesn't have an approval, the authority or role in this, but both the legislative body, city council, and the planning commission have an opportunity to provide comments to the Public Utility Commission through this process. And so it is set up specifically to have a 45-day notice so folks can be aware of what the project will be before they officially file the petition. So if you have any questions or comments, you can make those in this time period. And these folks have already presented at the Planning Commission. So that happened earlier, and we have also met with the fire chief because of the battery nature of this project. So that's just the intro, and let me get this up and running for you.
And we do have the opportunity, excuse me, we do have the opportunity to watch the recording from the Planning Commission, so you can kind of go through, potentially, this is for your benefit as well as ours, go through a little bit faster, I think, than you did for them. We will, I think, take the opportunity to watch that as well and send Regina any comments we didn't think of tonight, so.
Okay, great. So I can flip through this pretty quickly then, if you'd,
I think so.
if
Yeah,
you'd prefer.
got it.
They've got that in their packet too.
And we've also, I think everybody's also read what you've
Okay.
provided, so.
I mean, that said, is there anything you'd like me to focus on? We've kind of got, maybe I'll just flip to the overview slide here. I think Regina did a really nice job of introducing it. I mean, we're really just here to be
Well, I
a
think-
resource for you guys,
And I think
right?
because this meeting has a different audience than the Planning Commission would, if you wanted to go through, 5 or 10 minutes, the overview of the project would be great.
Yeah.
People understand that are tuned in now or will watch this later. Certainly, I don't want to cut that off, but.
Okay, great.
I did listen
So,
to the Planning Commission, and that got into fairly deep detail, and I don't want to make you do that twice.
okay, great. So maybe we just skip to, so we're a battery energy storage company, probably no surprise there. And, we are the long-term owners operators of these projects, and that's why these conversations are particularly important, because we would like to be around for 20 plus years and be here to answer questions and be a resource for you guys, not only for this project, but battery storage projects in general. It is a very rapidly growing industry, and I am sure we are not the first battery folks or the last that you're going to hear from. So, Raj, to your point, maybe just to focus on this bit, kind of overview of the project, and I think its kind of primary objectives and goals for the community. We've been looking at this project for a really long time with Global Foundries. We finally aligned on a size, a use case, a location, a duration for the system. And the primary goal here is to dispatch the project during times of peak consumption on not only the Vermont grid, but the regional ISO grid. So we're bringing down Global Foundries energy consumption during these peak times. they get hit with very expensive demand charges based on their usage during these peak hours. And so it is a very significant economic benefit to the facility, helps reduce their operating costs, and helps kind of ensure the long-term viability of Fab 9 here in Essex Junction. In so doing that, it's also, the alternatives to doing that are putting in, diesel generators or reciprocating engines or something like that that can kind of dispatch at a local level. So you have this kind of like clean power capacity that you can dispatch during these events and avoid, the build out of additional generation, in the New England region and here in Vermont. Siting near Global Foundries, probably no secret, they are the largest electric load in the state of Vermont, have a lot of draw on the electric grid during those peak times. And so by reducing demand from Global Foundries during those peak hours, you're reducing power flows on the broader Vermont power grid, opening up, more sort of system capacity for other users of the grid, be it generation or load, and kind of helping to ensure, not only enhanced reliability of the system, but reduced needs for additional transmission build out, additional capacity resources, and additional generation. So, a lot of kind of direct benefits to Global Foundries and the community, but also, kind of more regionally, you're reducing kind of the needs for what is expected to be, additional load growth in the state as you see electrification of vehicles, heating, everything. So, incidentally, kind of supporting renewable energy goals of the community and of Global Foundries, helping with the integration of solar resources, especially. Global Foundries has solar that they are building that I know you guys have talked about in the past already. And, as you see more renewables, come onto the system in Essex Junction, I know you guys have ambitious renewable integration goals, greenhouse gas reduction goals through the community energy plan. This is something that can also be, as you see kind of additional generation locally, can be used to kind of absorb that, shift it to during 2 hours where you don't have, solar output, and reduce kind of power flows on the system locally as well. Kind of from a employment labor perspective, all of our projects, we do look to use local suppliers, local contractors, local consultants. In our permitting process, we utilize SRH out of Burlington. We're utilizing TCE, now Bowman out of Williston, to do all of our site diligence. When we get to the construction phase, hiring local construction companies, electrical contractors, and then also there will be, kind of long-term operations and maintenance of the project as well, where we'll need local folks to come in and perform routine maintenance on the system. And then, source of tax revenue for the state. And there is the option for, municipal tax revenues from the project as well. So that's kind of an overview of the system. 16 megawatts, 52 megawatt hour system, so relatively good size battery. I would say, I forgot to introduce my colleagues here, but I do have Joe Levitt. He's our Chief Technology Officer and responsible for kind of everything on the design and engineering and implementation of the project side. Laura Coriel, she's our Head of Market Development and native here in Vermont as well. And she's been working a lot with Global Foundries on the permitting aspects of the project and, getting the 45-day letter submitted, and the full CPG application, which we intend to submit probably towards the end of August or maybe early September. And then Jeff Cram is here as well from Global Foundries. If you have any questions for Global Foundries, we'd be happy to put Jeff on the spot too. Anything else to focus on? I've got some information about kind of the location of the project. We explored pretty much every inch of territory on Global Foundries campus. Ultimately ended up here adjacent to their switchyard 3. Basically need to be next to one of the substations to address the peak kind of loading on that substation, be able to do the peak shaving that we need to do. due to other existing easements, underground utilities, space being reserved for other purposes, the switch yards on, I guess, the east side of the campus here were much more difficult to develop around. So this, and they have the most load on switchyard 3 as well, so it presented a nice location for the project. Zooming in a little bit, about a little less than an acre of space, and kind of tucked away, we'll be surrounded on 3 sides by trees and the 4th side by the existing substation there. Kind of better, kind of detailed view of the layout of the project is a combination of these integrated transformers and power conversion units, and then we've got 12 of these 20-foot battery containers as well. This is a little bit on the aesthetics. I'd love to tell you that these are a masterful work of art, but they are, in fact, high voltage power infrastructure, lots of cables and conduit, and these containers here on the bottom. These are the battery containers on the left. These are the power conversion systems on the right. They are, and this is a picture of our first project down in Danville, Danville, Virginia, on the top here. They are at their tallest about 10 feet high. So we have some other photos in here of the various vantage points from around the project. And they will be, for the most part, shielded by either the trees on 3 sides, or we do have one photo where you might be able to see it, but the containers would be much shorter than the building here and the transformer here. So even from this perspective, it should be mostly, if not completely, out of view.
Will there be any noise from the especially from the conversion units?
There is some noise. I think it's, maybe 60 decibels or so at the max at the source. We are doing a noise analysis as part of the permit application. And I think, do you guys know the results of that preliminarily?
The study shows that the nearest property boundary we're at, current ambient levels.
Yeah. So, 30 or so decibels, I think, is what the results of the noise study have shown at the closest property boundary, closest building.
So the apartment buildings closest can hear it with their windows open?
They would not, it would not be any louder than current ambient noise. So no louder than kind of the existing substation that is there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a continual ambient noise, or does it rise and fall?
There are fans in the power conversion units that are on when we're running the system, and when the system's off, it's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. So hot days when it's operating a lot is when it would be, I guess, the loudest.
Yeah, I mean, my only concern would be, I know you're saying over and above ambient.
Yeah.
From the current substation, but you're talking about a condition where everybody's going to be exposing themselves the most to outside noise with the windows open and everything else. And if it's a hum like you often hear from a server farm or somewhere else, then ambient or not, it's an added annoyance.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't compare what 30 decibels is right now.
Yeah.
But if it's the fan I'm hearing right now constantly when I'm trying to sleep, then that's going to bother me.
Okay.
So I'm curious about what that level and what that impact will be on the 60 people that apartment building will face the unit. Obviously it'll dissipate on the other side, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that.
Yeah.
And the rest of it's just park and global, right? It's not.
Yeah.
And there's nothing developable anywhere else.
Right.
That's right.
That space between Global's property and Franklin wouldn't be developed, I don't think. I think that's a hill.
And we can share, we did not include it in this presentation, but we can certainly share with you guys the noise analysis that we have done and kind of get into any of the details there and provide some kind of analogous noise levels. I think I want to say 30 decibels is like a faint whisper.
Is a quiet suburban night.
Yeah,
Okay.
So,
Great.
Can I
That's
ask
great.
for one, just because again, acknowledging the fact this is this might be a different audience, still acknowledging the fact that there is a well-detailed presentation. I do appreciate that before the Planning Commission, and I do want to say thank you to the Planning Commission for asking a lot of very difficult but also detailed questions on the project, so I really appreciate that. But I would like you to reiterate, if you can, just the safety part of it that you talked about in that. Specifically, you addressed a question around fire department training, and I'd like you to talk about that just for a second for this group.
yeah, absolutely. And Joe is our resident expert on that, so I will let him speak to it. Do you want to take the hot seat, or?
If you don't,
Yeah,
if you don't
yeah,
mind.
if you don't
If
mind,
you
I know
can
we
use
only,
the microphone, it's helpful.
we only have one chair there, sorry.
And feel free to pull up the other chair if you want.
Okay. We're in a little bit of a flux in this room right now.
Yeah, so our engagement with the fire department, local emergency responders is very extensive. We kicked that off last week with Chief Gaborio. Hopefully I'm repeating his name correctly there. But in addition to all the things we do to kind of design and develop these projects in a way in accordance with the latest and greatest industry standards and safety measures to keep them safe, to make them not the systems that you've probably seen pictures of or videos of in the news, to keep them kind of in a safe operating condition at all times and understand that condition and take actions as we need to. One of the biggest things we do is get with the fire department early. Go through familiarization, which is what we kicked off last week. Following on with that is compilation of our kind of detailed design package and specifications, and then also a comprehensive hazard mitigation analysis where we have a third party come in and review the system design and safety measures. Once we have that kind of complete package together, we hand that over and review it together with the fire department, make sure we're all on the same page in terms of how we've met and mitigated those things. And then in parallel with that are working on an emergency response plan. So detailed measures that go through how, if in the worst case scenario something were to happen, how together we would respond to that. A big part of that is just understanding the technology and the hazards around it and how they, given the system design and appropriate measures for handling emergencies and batteries, can keep themselves safe and keep the public safe. Basically, we've designed these systems basically now such that if for some reason something did happen, all the measures we take to prevent it fail for whatever reason, that these things are contained in a small area, and the fire department's job at that point is effectively just to keep everybody back, monitor the situation, ensure that there is no jeopardy of something happening from spreading outside of our project fence line. And at the end of the day, what should happen then is we have damaged equipment that we then have to come in and deal with. So having kind of established that emergency response plan that addresses all those objectives and keeping themselves safe, keeping the public safe, we go on site towards when we near project completion. We do on-site training as well as classroom training with the fire department, and then an ongoing engagement throughout the life of the project every year, supporting additional training as needed to keep the fire department and other emergency response agencies up to speed and cognizant of what's going on with the project.
And the cost is?
It's all of us. Part of the package.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would maybe add so we went through a CPG process for one of these systems in Northfield recently, and some of the conditions of the permit that we got there was.
Sorry.
Some of the conditions of the permit we got there were, kind of ensuring routine training for the local fire department, ensuring the establishment of that emergency response plan before the project was able to go, even enter construction, and then ensuring documented compliance with It's National Fire Protection Act 855. It's the standard for fire safety for these large-scale energy storage systems. And so those were three things that were put in the permit there that we'd be they're things we're going to do anyway, so obviously very happy to commit to those same sort of things in your community to help, ensure the long-term safety of the project.
Great, thank you.
Check Amber. Tim, did you have anything?
I don't at this point.
Okay. Amber?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. I think that's it for us. I have started to watch the Planning Commission recording, and I think if we have other questions, we'll either get them to you through Regina, or we'll just compile any comments we have for the PUC. This it's a question for Global, I guess. Do you all have your own hazmat, or is it rescue hazmat response too? And would that be?
We have hazmat and fire and EMT on site.
And who would be first response for this property?
We're first responders.
Okay. Great. No, I think it's an interesting project. It's nice to see more improvements done on the property, and more commitment to improving the property and doing all that. And so I think that's great.
Well, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for taking the time.
Yeah.
I didn't check if there's anybody.
Oh, you're correct. Sorry. That was my fault.
Not off the hook yet.
If you give me 1 second, it doesn't look like there's anybody, but it's the portion of this presentation where we take public questions or comment on a business item. So if anyone, there's nobody in the room, but if anyone online has any questions or comments for City Council on this project, now would be the time to ask them. Not seeing any hands raised. We'll give another minute or so. All right, not seeing any. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
All right, getting back to the agenda. Presentation and discussion of Green Mountain Transit's funding gap. We have, hold on. Clayton with us from Green Mountain Transit, I believe,
Hi, everybody.
on the Zoom. Good evening.
Hi, folks. I hope that you can hear me.
Can hear you, yep.
Excellent, great. I apologize for not being there in person. I am on vacation this week and out of state, and so we'll have to present remotely, so thank you for having that option. And so what I wanted to talk to you all about is some of the challenging times ahead for Green Mountain Transit in facing a gap that we have between our revenue and our expenses. And what I'm going to be talking you through is items that are going to be happening in the near future regarding service reductions. What I want to emphasize is that the situation is still going to be pretty fluid through the end of the next legislative session. And so one of the things that when we talk about the service reductions, we are approaching this as a worst case scenario. And so our hope is that we are going to be able to identify additional revenue sources and additional non-service expenses to cut that will mean that we do not have to reduce as much as that we are planning for, but we have to plan for potentially a large reduction. And so the reason for that is that over the past 5 years, the cost for operating public transit has grown at a much higher pace than the revenue that is generated from that. A lot of that is the increased cost of labor that people are seeing across industries, and especially with our work requiring a very limited resource, which is CDL drivers in Vermont. We've seen labor costs go up a lot since the pandemic. And so what this means is that During the pandemic, we received federal dollars, like most municipalities, and this allowed us to fill that funding gap so that we could continue to operate our full level of service for the past few years. We had hoped that the legislature would assist us with additional funding so that we could avoid service reductions moving forward. But during this past legislative session, it was made, very clear that that was something that the legislature was not looking to support. We do think, though, that when we actually have service cuts on the table, and it's more of a it's less of an ambiguous, hey, we'll have to cut in the future, and more, here's what we're going to cut and when, that may change the people's opinions at the State House. But like I said, we need to plan for the worst. So the worst is that in fiscal year 26, we will exhaust our COVID relief funds at the tail end of fiscal year 25. And that will mean that we'll have about a $3 million gap between projected revenue and projected expenses for fiscal year 26. That $3 million gap, if we were going to close that gap through service, would require us to reduce about 30% of our overall urban service. And so obviously that is a huge amount, and we know that is going to, if we have to go through with those full reductions, that will seriously impact the community and riders that we serve, and we hope to be able to avoid that. We are going to be issuing a draft plan for service reductions that will be made public on August 27th. And the draft plan is exactly that. It's a draft. We will still be working on other solutions. And very importantly, we will be getting ongoing feedback from public hearings that we'll be having. We'll have 4 public hearings in September, 2 of which will be online, and 1 will be in Burlington, and 1 will be either in Williston or Essex Junction areas. And we'll be taking feedback from the people that attend that. And we'll also be taking feedback from surveys that we're doing with various constituent groups. And so one of the things that I'll be doing by the end of the day tomorrow is sending all of you and Regina, so the select board and town manager, with a sort of service survey that will help us understand the values that you all have when it comes to the service that we have, and what you would like for prioritization. It takes sort of 7 different industry standard questions about how service should be implemented, and some of the different trade-offs that we'll be trying to balance. And so we'll be sending that your way via email tomorrow. After the 4 public hearings, then in October, the GMT Board of Commissioners will continue to work on the reduction plan, and they will finalize it either at their October 15th meeting or at their November meeting. The reason for the timing is that we have to present the legislature by November 15th with a financial sustainability plan showing the legislature how we will be filling that gap between revenue and expenses. And so therefore we have to have, we have to know what the service reductions would look like before then. And that's sort of been driving the faster than we would prefer timeline to consider this. We expect that in 2025, that there will be 2 phases for the service reductions. The first phases will go into effect in February, and those will be for fiscal year 2025. And the second reductions will go into effect in June of 2025, just before fiscal year 26 starts, and those will be our fiscal year 26 reductions. I can tell you that when we have to prepare a plan that cuts a third of our service, there's no getting around the fact that it's going to lead to folks, being upset, rightly so, because this will impact their daily lives. We certainly expect that people will, during the public hearings, will have strong feedback for us, and we are, prepared for that. And again, it's our hope that these reductions will not need to be go into effect, and that there are, or at least not the full reductions. I think that it's probably very unlikely that the legislature would fully fund us so that there would be no reductions necessary. But hopefully it will be nowhere near what we have to plan for. And so I wanted to kind of stop here and to open it up for questions, because the two other items that I would like to discuss with you are a bit more forward looking and have to deal with assessments. And those are related to the service reductions, but a separate topic. So let's be happy to answer any questions that the group may have on what to expect in the coming months as we go through this process.
Anyone?
I do have a question, but that question is about special assessments, so I don't know if you need to share your portion before we get to it.
Sure.
But I will acknowledge my question. Maybe this will help with where you're going to go. In the letter that I see here, in the note that I see here in the packet, so I don't know if this is directed at you, Clayton, or if this is directed at Regina's staff for the comment that's in here. But there is a note in here concerning the fact that in regard to a special assessment, GMT statute gives them the authority to request a special assessment. Not requesting a special assessment to address the funding gap was identified by legislators as a reason that they were opposed to providing additional funds to GMT. I'm curious if this is a general comment about the legislature, or if there are specific legislators that had made these comments because, from the standpoint of giving feedback and talking about special assessments, and I'm going to be a little flat-footed right now, this sounds like a dare from legislators to say, go ahead, special assess, because of the fact municipalities, you have to get a unanimous vote. So it's not a feel-good message that's in this particular letter, and I just want to make sure that the public knows and that we know who we should direct our comments and feedback to as we think about this problem and this concern, which has been coming for a while. So that was my question in reading this letter in the packet.
And I'm just going to add to that too, that piggyback to that, with your public hearings, are you inviting any of the Chittenden County members or other members of the House or Senate Transportation Committees? Those who, because we're in a new biennium, it would have to be those who traditionally sat on those committees or have past sat on those committees, so obviously we won't know who the future ones will be.
Right.
But it's interesting because, some of them will see service reductions or special assessment requests come through. I'm thinking of a couple specifically.
Yes.
So I'm wondering how, I certainly will be reaching out to them and would encourage them to come and hear from the very large number of UVM Health and University of Vermont and Burlington and Winooski employees that count on the number 2, and those who are struggling with the Essex Williston line being hourly. I'm not sure how you cut service on that. So yeah, I'm just curious if that's part of the outreach, if you're going to invite those folks to these public hearings as well. And I didn't mean to
Yeah,
go down the
so-
special assessment line too fast, but
Well,
Elaine?
I have two questions, comments, and sorry we're preempting your special assessments conversation, but I think I interpreted this memo differently, Marcus. So the comment of not requesting a special assessment to address the funding gap was identified by legislators as a reason they were opposed to providing additional funds says to me that the legislature is not willing to provide additional funds until the GMT exercises an assessment and obtains additional funds. And then if that's not enough, then the legislature will consider adding funds. That's how I interpreted that. The other thing, so there's two possible, probably more than two ways to look at that. But the other thing about the surveys, the focus groups and such, I would love to recommend, Clayton, and you've probably already thought of this, but CCRPC has done an enormous amount of work on ensuring robust public participation in the planning process. And they have gone out of their way to establish connections and communications with vulnerable populations and marginalized populations. And I believe that those populations are the ones that use and rely on Green Mountain Transit an enormous amount. And so I would love to suggest that you connect with CCRPC to make sure that your outreach to the community to get the feedback you need includes those folks, because I think it would be a glaring mistake to not make an effort to actively engage with those communities.
I couldn't agree with you more. I am actually a member of CCRPC's Equity Advisory Council that focuses on serving. And so I'm sorry that I missed the delicious food that they had at their last meeting, as I had a conflict. And so certainly I'll be working with Ann Nelson to get the word out for the public meetings, as well as using our own. We have a Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, a JEDI committee, that we will be tapping into to help us get feedback from those members of our community. Getting to the special assessment, and so I can tell you that specifically this was brought up to me by the chair of the House Transportation Committee. I can tell you that this is a person that has chose not to run for re-election, so that they will not be back at the State House next year, but I believe that she was speaking on behalf of her committee with expressing the concerns that from their perspective, GMT has this statutory authority to go to our urban municipal members and ask for additional funds, and that they saw us coming to the state to request additional funds without doing that to our municipal members as concerning to them. And so I think that we need to, it is correct that we would have to have in unanimous votes in all of the urban members in order to have a binding special assessment. And so frankly, I'm not sure if a special assessment is going to be possible, but we need to go through that process and demonstrate that we made a good faith effort to at least partially address the funding gap through a special assessment. I do know that we were able to get $630,000 worth of additional one-time funds from the legislature this past session. That was primarily due to the advocacy on the Senate Transportation Committee. And so what I'm going to be recommending to the GMT Board of Commissioners is that our special assessment match that, so that would then be an additional $600,000 or $630,000 raised by the 9 urban municipal members. And but we'll finalize that ask to you all in the coming months, so that we'll have that to you by October, so that it can be incorporated into your planning. And I would expect that that would be similar to the assessments would be prorated, based on the the size of or the amount of service that's provided to each community. And so I think that the $250,000 that Essex Junction provides in its assessment is about 1/16 of our total overall assessment. So whatever the math would be for 1/16 of 630 would likely be what that amount is. And I should have done that before I got here. Let's see if I can open up a calculator.
40,000.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Raj. And the thing to keep in mind about the special assessment is that part of the reason why GMT is in this situation is because one-time funds made us look like we were in a better financial position than we really were. And so one-time funds from a special assessment is going to be helpful in delaying service reductions, but is not going to help us with the overall system change that's going to be necessary. I do think that delay, though, is going to be successful for a variety of reasons. Number one, the state or the legislature did receive a report last session that highlighted ways to raise additional revenue for public transit. They chose not to act upon it during the session. Part of the reason why they chose not to act upon it is because our urban transit system is the first to hit the fiscal cliff. The other rural transit agencies in the state are going to be hitting their fiscal cliffs in a year or two later. And so when it's more than just GMT that is in a fiscal dilemma, I suspect that there will be a greater appetite to look at how the state generates revenue overall for public transit. So that's why I think that the special assessment could be helpful in kind of bridging that. And did I cover all of the different items that were brought up?
Yeah, and
as we talked.
just a clarification, sorry, just because this is a lot. Special assessment in addition to the special assessment would be an addition to potential service reductions.
Correct.
It wouldn't offset them completely.
Correct.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I realize, politically is going to be very difficult for all of our city councils and select boards is that in a sense, we're going to be asking for more funds and providing less service. And I could certainly imagine that, people are going to be concerned about that. And that's going to be a difficult political ask. And I think that the only response that I can say is that, we've, probably the municipal portion, should have been a bit higher. And this is something where I actually spent most of my time arguing with the legislature this year about this. And I'm sorry that I'm sitting in a room that's getting darker. And when I started the meeting, there was plenty of light.
We still can see you. Yeah, we got you.
Okay, good. Okay, good. And so, because I really wanted to highlight that, outside of Chittenden County, municipalities are not primary contributors to public transit. And so, in the state of Vermont. And, our Chittenden County municipalities collectively collect almost $4 million for public transit. And municipalities outside of Chittenden County for the rest of the state collectively contribute about $900,000 towards public transit. And so that to me, when I'm talking with legislators and about the systemic issue, I think that we need to to realize and have them realize that our urban municipalities are already contributing far more than their rural counterparts in terms of both per capita and absolute dollars. And so, you know, I feel like we're in some ways being punished by having the only urban transit system in the state, and then getting sort of drawn into the urban versus rural battles that happen between Chittenden County and the rest of the state at the State House. Also, to get to the point about what we're doing for legislative outreach, all of the Chittenden County delegation will be invited to get briefed on the service reductions the afternoon that we announce them, and I will be asking them to come to the public hearings, and whether they choose to do so or not, of course, is up to them. I do know that in the past that we've had legislators participate in our public hearings, and I certainly hope that they will do so for this. One of the things that is a little bit more forward focused is that in addition to a special assessment, one of the things that I think is going to be critical for GMT is that we go through reform of our current assessment system. And so our current assessment system was established in 2008. And at that time, the municipalities were really focused on having predictability when it came to public transit costs. And so there was a conscious decision to come up with an assessment methodology whereby communities would be issued an overall assessment for their fixed route service, and then that assessment would go up by a fixed percentage each year. And typically it was 3 or 4%, depending on the financial circumstances of each year. That provided predictability, because then town managers and city managers, you know, when they were preparing their budgets, were able to know that, hey, it's going to be this plus, you know, no more than 4%. But it did contribute to our current situation that they're in, and it did contribute to an actual decrease in the percentage of funds that we receive from municipalities overall, from about 25% of our operating costs down to about 20%. More importantly to me, one of the things that I don't like is that it separated service costs from the assessment. And so it sort of created this situation where, you know, like we have a certain assessment that we give to Essex Junction. It's for, you know, we provide service. And then if we add or remove service, it doesn't really influence the assessment level. And then that makes no sense to me because then it means that anytime a municipality comes to us and says, hey, we want to add service, we say no, because our assessment methodology doesn't really allow for us to collect more. And where you really see this is, say, like our service amenities, and where we have rest or the waiting shelters. And so if we add shelters, that increases our costs, but our assessments don't go up. And so it just creates a situation where instead of GMT working with communities to provide like the best service, you know, we're just, you know, sort of pushing back against any new costs, which I don't think is helpful. And similarly, it divorces you all from things that may cost us a lot of money that maybe you don't really value. And so I think that if we move towards having an assessment methodology that was, you know, rooted in the service that was provided, and then we would be able to offer you all a sort of a la carte menu of, you know, here's the different options that you all can have, whether that's additional shelters, whether that's you know, maybe having special groups receive, you know, fare-free service. Like one of the things that we're going to be working with in the coming years is asking communities to consider a flat rate so that anyone under 18 would ride for free, and we could offer that somewhat at a reasonable cost, because it would be not treated as fare revenue, and that gets into a whole economics discussion of public transit that I don't want to dive into. But all you need to know is that, strangely enough, under FTA rules, fare revenue is not considered local match. And so it means that it's actually not nearly as valuable to us as, say, your assessment. And so if you were to give us money so that certain folks would ride for free, under the rules, that is considered local match. And so we want to work towards things like that. And but I'm sorry for going down a rabbit hole. But so in talking about the assessment reform, I just want to let you know that as soon as we go through what we have to do immediately and in the near future, when it comes to a special assessment and potential service reductions, that I do want to work closely with your community on a reform package for our assessments. This would be something that we would, probably the earliest it could go into effect would be fiscal year 27. And but to me, it's something that really needs to be done to address some of the underlying systemic issues. And so I'll stop here and continue to answer questions as best as I can. And I'm at my mom's, and so I have to figure out how to turn the light out of this room.
Say hi to Mom, and we really appreciate you joining us during your vacation, Clayton.
Oh, my pleasure.
Sorry.
There we go.
I think, go ahead, Marcus.
Clayton, let me just say first that I always appreciate your participation. You're very frank and forthcoming, and I really do appreciate the depth and insight that you provide. I do want to also acknowledge the fact that, as you said earlier, the challenge on CDL drivers, we feel it here as we got, as it was acknowledged by our Public Works Director at our last meeting, it's a significant challenge, so we feel your pain. I'll ask this quick question, just out of curiosity. You've added fares now into the system. I'm curious about how that's impacting one way or the other your ridership.
So I can tell you that our ridership always drops significantly in the summertime, and we restarted fares just as the colleges were letting out. So we saw we've seen our normal dip. It hasn't been higher than it has been in the past, and so we're hopeful that means that when we get back to our peak times, which will be starting in a few weeks with the return of the colleges, that we won't see a dip. But right now we're sort of pleasantly surprised with a variety of things with the return to fares. One is that it doesn't appear to have impacted ridership, and if it has, it's smaller than we were worried it would be. We do seem to be meeting our revenue targets, because we did a lot of guesswork about how the revenue would work, especially with the fare caps. And it does appear that, at least for now, that we're meeting our targets. And the way that helps is that obviously if we receive more than we targeted, then that will decrease the funding gap that we have. And if we, and I guess what I was most worried about is that we wouldn't get to our projections and that would actually make our funding gap bigger. But that doesn't seem to be the case. The thing that I'm going to tell you that I have real mixed feelings about is the impact that it's had on ridership in terms of behavioral issues. And so I was a firm supporter of sort of fare free forever, in the sense that I liked when there was no entry barriers to have people be able to get around the community, and it made me, made my progressive heart feel good. And but I also know that for the past 2 years, while we had fare free, that we would average about 4 new no trespasses a week, were people who are doing something on the buses that, where they couldn't be on there. And we actually would get more public feedback through our feedback channels asking for fares to return from folks who felt that the fare free was, sort of causing or magnifying, behavioral issues. Since the return of fares on May 20th, we've no trespassed 4 people in 2.5 months. That was the weekly average. And we have heard from, feedback from folks who are riders that, that they have seen a change and they feel that they're more comfortable using the transit. And so, I think that, the unfortunate reality is that there is a small subset of our, riding population that use transit as something that was less for transit and more for, getting out of the weather or having, something to do or spending their time at the transit center. And we're just not, seeing that now. And I think that that's going to be overall helpful for us, even if I, don't like the overall sort of conclusion from it that maybe fares, are necessary.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Amber, do you have anything? No? Okay. Clayton, I've got a million questions. I've got a note on like 4 of them to follow up with you when you're not on vacation. Nothing that needs to be addressed tonight. So I will do that and just say that I appreciate your update. And I'm intrigued by the assessment reform process, and especially with, I really hope folks pay attention to this. I'll be beating the bushes a little bit because, we hear about the need for housing. We are a very high, our community uses the busiest line. It hits, 4 towns, right? Essex, Junction, Colchester, Winooski, Burlington, at least from here to Burlington. We're being asked to take on more housing. We are receiving daily complaints about traffic. I just think there's just massive disconnects in the logic. But we're not going to solve it tonight. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to future discussions. I look forward to coming back and saying, woo, we dodged a bullet. Things aren't going to be so bad. And so let's hope that happens.
I think we all agree with that.
That's awesome. Can't wait.
Love that optimism.
Yeah.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your vacation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Is there any public comment from folks online? There's nobody here in the room unless, Tim, you have anything? I didn't think so. Okay. Anybody here joining
Cristin.
remotely? Yep. Cristin, go ahead.
Yeah, give me just a second. Okay, so it was really nice to hear that that gentleman understands the problems, and he's kind of caught in the middle. And it's nice to hear that he was a part of the Equity Advisory Council and is thinking about those things. And Raj, what my thoughts are on it kind of echoed what you just said, but I'd want to say it anyway. We have this plan to build up. From what I understand, there's no limit of the amount of people that can live in a building. There's no pathway that is outlined to ownership. There's no means to provide oversight and enforcement. And I say that because we don't have the means to do it, even though we might want to do it. And I give examples of city residents bringing issues to the council about this is out of compliance, that is out of compliance. There's just a lot, right, for us to even get a hold of. And then so we want to put as many people as possible in houses, and I completely understand that. And through an equity lens, people need to be housed, absolutely. Now we're going to take away, well, we are not taking, it's going to be taken away. 30% of the transportation routes, at least for now, until those other public transportation routes are also potentially cut in the future, giving those people, more people, less means to get to work, get to a grocery store, get to wherever it is they need to get, a hospital or whatever. So if we don't have the infrastructure, and it looks like we're not going to have the infrastructure, and this goes back to our identity, everything is a system. What is the plan to change the plan to be able to create this walkable city that is equitable for the people that inhabit it, that are relying on this infrastructure that is actually being cut? And I don't think you can answer that tonight, but I just wanted to put that to the city council to really consider how we move forward when we don't have the infrastructure. And we, meaning the state, we're relying on the places around us to build this city that we have in our mind. Thank you.
Christine, I appreciate that, and I wrote down many of those same questions while Clayton was talking. It's stuff I've written down before. In many ways, we've been told this is what we shall do. In the past couple of years from the legislature, this is what we can say yes and can't, and more specifically, can't say no to. I'm thinking, yeah. And so I agree with much of what you said in terms of, you know, this is a massive systemic problem where the rules of the game keep getting changed. And the problem just gets more wicked. So just wanted to acknowledge what you're saying, and at least for me, you know, I have many questions in terms of how this is all supposed to fit together to achieve what I thought we just learned from the community they wanted in a strategic plan. So
can I add on that particular note that the strategic plan did lay that out as a priority? So from the standpoint of what is the plan, while we don't have specifics right now, we have that first step that we need in order to start building on the specifics, because it's been identified as a priority by the community.
No, that I would agree with. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and I just mean in terms of, I think I'm just feeling a little bit of frustration in terms of, we can have a very specific and well thought out identity, and we are limited in terms of how far we can go to achieve that by forces we have no control over. Some of them legislative, some of them financial, and just part of the process, I guess. But just Cristin, I think we all appreciate the comments.
I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Anyone else with a comment on this? All right, Regina, anything else to wrap up with on this?
Nope.
Okay. Then we will, Tim, if you'd like to join us, thank you so much for your patience. Yes, and Elaine.
Just a reminder that due to a conflict of interest, I will not be participating in this conversation. I'll just be listening and but not participating in any way.
Okay. Great. All right. This is 5E, discussion and consideration of Champlain Valley Expo sound waivers and concerts. Tim Shea is joining us again. Thanks for coming back. I hope fair prep is going well.
Yes.
Thank you for hosting us yesterday for the election.
Yeah, we made it work. A little clunky there and all that, but we got around it.
A lot going on over there.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And we look forward to the general here in November.
Yes. Hopefully less busy over there. Yeah. All right. Just let me find this memo.
Yep. So essentially, last time we talked about this was June 26th. There were some questions at the time. We consolidated those up, got them over to Tim. He responded to those questions. That information is in your packet. The packet also includes the data from the survey that CVE put out themselves, and so you've got that there. Also at that last meeting, staff was asked to look at the spectrum of public participation and what a project like this would, where it would land in that spectrum, and what the outreach methods would look like. So in terms of that spectrum, it lands in the consult level, and I'll just add that this is, it's a little bit and how we think about this, because this is not necessarily a city project that we're bringing to the table and have opportunities for various alternatives and things. This is a request brought to us. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of thinking through that. So I thought it made sense to circle back around and have a discussion about what other questions or thoughts the council has at this point.
Great. Ashley is joining us too. Why don't we talk with Tim first, since you've been waiting, and I do want to check in, Ashley, about your recommendations. Well, about that part of it as well. So thanks for being here. Tim, thanks for the responses, the survey responses. Thanks for doing that. And answering the questions. I think we could probably go around the room. I'm going to ask a couple. I think for me, I don't want to speak for everybody. For me, I don't want to put you on the spot necessarily.
Okay.
Some of these questions I don't expect you to have an answer to tonight.
Okay.
So, you know, I just think we'll discuss some of them, take them with you, get back to us when you think you've got your thoughts put together on it, or something solid. But some of the things that came up, and these are in no particular order, I guess. So we talked about this a little bit in terms of, you know, and I can't quite remember if some of these decibel limits are sort of contract-based with performers. Certainly, a lot goes into how sound moves. But overall, if we were to move forward with this, is there a way that we could drop the decibel level? And I guess I'm thinking of it, you know, somewhere more around the sub 80 or 75 level. Overall, and are there structural setup modifications to how, my ignorance is going to show on this, but how speaker stacks are deployed through the property?
Yeah.
You know, like I've been to a couple of shows where, and I just saw pictures of Osheaga where, you know, yes, there were speaker stacks on the stage, but they were smaller because there were towers throughout the property as it went back, and that focused the sound a little more and didn't require, my assumption is didn't require the main units to be as powerful, you know. So to what extent is CVE open to, you know, looking at things like that so that the overall sound impact in the area can go down? We understand patrons want that experience. I like it, a nice, loud, good quality experience when I'm at a concert. I don't need to be blown away just from the first 30 rows though, so I don't. So structurally, what can be done? And to what extent are you open to discussing a lower sound request?
No, very open, and we obviously want this to work, and it's that balance. And you know, I can't answer the sub 80 or 75, but I will say that it gets to a point where a band just won't accept the offer, and I don't have what that number is. I can certainly clarify that, but it gets to a point. It's. I mean, and I mentioned last time, the band chooses us more than we choose them, and if you put the guardrails too tight, they simply just won't come. I think it's often thought, well, hey, we're the ones paying. We determine how loud you are. Unfortunately, it's not the case. They just go somewhere else. But I can certainly pull some information together and see what is the lowest, a reasonable number, that it's still a viable concert venue.
Yeah, and so I guess I'm thinking of that in terms of, you know, you pair that or a slightly lower level with some sort of, not extravagant, but some sort of structural modifications to the area. I don't know what those would be. And I think the idea of a sound study came up before. And I think for me, it's sort of thinking about what you asked, you know, what do you mean by a sound study?
Yeah.
I think for me, it's sort of evolved into more of an overall look at the property and surrounding area and what we're trying to do, and having an expert come in and say, you know, we can do X, Y, and Z to these areas, and if you can lower the stack sound a little bit and we can do these things, then we can mitigate this collectively by those two efforts. So I guess as opposed to, I mean, I'm just speaking for me, but as opposed to like we'd still want an expert to come in and take a look at this and see what could be done and make some predictions. I don't know how you could test it.
No, great question, and I did share just late today with Regina. We have talked to a sound engineer about that, and he has some thoughts. It's one of the challenges. It's hard to test the hypothetical because you really don't know. It's speculation, and that speculation could be accurate, could not be accurate. But no, we want to find a path for this to work. So can look into the positioning of the speakers, but it's tough in an open air venue too. And we talked to the engineer about barriers, and barriers either need to be close to where the sound is generated or where the sound is being received. And obviously it's tough to do it where the sound's being received because you're not going to put a wall in someone's backyard. But I think there's more work to do there, but it's again, maybe I can share that memo because I think it's a helpful one there. It is hard to measure speculative.
I know that, sorry, if you don't mind. On this particular note, though, because I know that it would be very quick to turn this around, but we do have a fair coming up. Even anecdotally, I mean, for myself, I was thinking about taking a sound meter around the city during the fair just to see if I could, again, try to put some data to it, try to understand a little bit better through that. And I don't know how quickly something like this could be put together because we do have an event coming up. It will have concerts, so we do have something that we can kind of try to, again, have an educated understanding.
Great question, Noah, and I will comment on that because we will for this. As you know, we monitor all waived events at the facility, and what we'll be doing for the first weekend. We have a show on Friday the 23rd and Saturday the 24th, and we're going to have our sound monitor go into some of the neighborhoods during the show to get a sense of, in addition, right now we've always measured at our property boundary, go into some of the neighborhoods where questions have come up so we can hopefully have some data. Only challenge is it's not totally an apples to apples because you have the fair sound as well. So and the fair itself, in the midway, the carnival, there's music there, generates some sound. So as opposed to a show just in the grandstand, which we haven't had since 2015 with Neil Young, and the sound engineer has reviewed that data there, but we know we intend this year during the fair to get some readings in the neighborhoods, and we'll share it and see what it tells us.
Since we're on this particular, on the mitigation line, I did want to bring up, because in the packet, there's a number of links to sound mitigation products and other things that were offered up. I don't know if this was provided by staff or by CVE, but I mean, have you had a chance to review the echo barrier seems, and I'm just pointing out one thing. There's a number of things on here, but like the echo barrier, I can see how that tech works, but at the same time, it is kind of a temporary, portable, but physical wall that you're putting up. I don't know if you've considered these kinds of technologies and if this would be helpful or open to, this situation, but it looks like it's a tech that's specifically designed.
Is that the one where it's behind the stage there?
As I remember the picture when I went to this link, and I can click on it right now, this is the physical green wall. It looks like a wall of blankets that is put up and happens to be, you can put it behind it, but it's really along the sides, especially any side that is going to be most impactful. The example that I saw on their website was they had it on only one side because behind it was residences, whereas in the other direction there was just open space. So it's not like it has to surround the space, but it's a physical barrier that actually can reduce sound. So I don't know.
We looked at all those, and one thing, and I mentioned this and again, that email I sent late today to Regina, one suggestion or option may be if you ever want to talk to the sound engineer directly, it may be a worthwhile exercise because he can speak to the technical piece, which I can't do right here. But, what are the possibilities? So I put that out as an option as well.
I guess the question comes back for me, it's not an issue for us.
Yeah.
It's an issue for you.
Yeah, I
So
understand.
to what extent are you willing to pay for that? And I'm just being blunt.
No.
Because we're not going to pay for that.
No question.
So like,
Yeah.
how much and to what level is CV willing to go to complete either researching something that will get us, frankly, to the point where we don't need to do waivers, period, or they're so few and far between because they're only for the very biggest shows, and they're not that number. A lot of us aren't, I'll speak for myself, not always thrilled with the waiver process. I never really liked it. The idea that we would have to do that in the first place kind of troubles me because how do we respond to another resident that wants to do something different with another issue? We just heard about someone that hasn't mown their lawn on both sides of the sidewalk, and they come to me for a waiver on this. So anyway, I guess I'm curious, the bottom line, one of the bottom lines for me is this is a request you're bringing, as Regina pointed out. This isn't our project.
Correct.
And I guess understanding the reasoning you're doing this, the financial difficulty and trying to find some stable footing, how much, I guess for you and the board, how much are you willing to do to achieve that? And I don't expect you to have that answer tonight. And I don't even know which of these things in this, which of these solutions or studies would apply. And I guess all of that is just to say this is more complex than it sounds to me.
Yeah.
And that just brings me to my only other question, I guess, is what's the minimum, the shortest possible duration of a new agreement for this? Because, when we talked before, it was, we need a long-term agreement or permanent agreement. And permanent's a weird word, but, my assumption is it was 10 to 20 years of stability for we will have these waivers for a minimum of something like that. I'm coming back and saying, what's the very possible shortest? Because if it's shorter, then that leaves room to sort of see what works. Obviously, I understand that might not necessarily work for your need, and how you have to finance this thing.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a question.
And I'll answer the two questions. One, what are we willing to invest on sound? We will do whatever we can to minimize the impact of the sound as long as it's economically feasible for us. And if it's not, we would just not move forward there. Because I understand the sensitivity of the sound on the impact of the community. Our agreement now is 5 years, I think it is, a running 5-year sound agreement. With the investment we're looking to make, it would probably be difficult to justify it with much less than 10 years because you got to be able to pay it back. And we would be, and I don't want to portray that we're in a bad situation, but we'd be in a worse situation if we made this, and I mentioned this last time, if we made this $1 million or so investment, then 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, we reverse course. It really puts us in an awkward spot there. And that'd be, I guess, the decision that we would have to make. You said, okay, we're consider doing it, but for X amount of years, that's the decision our board would need to make.
Okay.
Can I add a question?
Sure. Yes, please.
So is it at all possible to do in, just for one season, maybe next year, 4 or 5 grandstand only concerts without any improvements to the grandstand? Test out the sound mitigation scenario that's going on from those events and move forward in that way?
Let me get back to you on that. My initial if we've seen the grandstand, it's in pretty rough shape, the seating. Structurally sound, but we have to have the ability to charge X amount for a ticket to attract someone. And if the condition of the grandstand doesn't justify that, it's they may, a one and done. They come once, may never come back again because the experience is what it is. But let me do some thinking on that. See if I'll get back to you on that one. I mean, it works now for the 10 days of the fair. It's the fair. It's kind of a, it's kind of
You're watching
dusty. It is,
monster trucks.
There's demo derby one night, there's a show the next night type of thing. But if you get to the point where you're bringing in higher level artists, the person buying that ticket has an expectation of the experience.
Amber, I'm trying to remember, you're up on the screen. Did you have anything?
Set, thanks.
Okay. Anything from you guys?
Not at this time. We've asked a lot of questions in 2 meetings. I think I'm okay for right now.
Okay. Tim, that was a lot. Thank you. Do you have any questions for us?
Just next steps and timing and things that we should be prepared for, and what I can get back to you on these. Do you want to send me these questions again?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Or,
I can do that.
And then what next steps would be, because timing is important. Like any project, the more it drags on, the more it can wobble along there.
Summer turns out wasn't a great time to bring this to us. We're going to talk about that, I think, with Ashley next.
Okay.
Like right now, sort of, we committed to a engagement protocol last September. She's made some recommendations on what that could include, and I think we're going to talk about what's feasible and appropriate from that and try to figure out how to turn that around. And I'm understanding you're probably not available the 28th for our next meeting. You're probably busy, a little busy. But I do anticipate having a time for the board to kind of have a conversation on this, which we really haven't had a chance to do.
At tonight or the 28th?
In the next 2 meetings.
Okay.
I think that, I do have one more question, actually. We asked a question the first time in terms of revisiting the current agreement.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure I understand your response. I think it was something to the effect that, to what extent are you willing to open the agreement again and talk about it? And you said, well, as it relates to these 15 additional waivers, that'd be fine. I'm wondering about more specificity, revisiting this sort of, for me, this request sort of opens the agreement again, just with the request. And so looking at it as a whole, because ultimately we would change the term anyway.
Correct.
If you're asking for 10 years, that pretty much opens the whole agreement to renegotiation. So I guess I'm curious, was your response, we would just simply want to add more waivers to it? We don't want to talk about how the terms are structured or how anything works, or is the whole thing open again for conversation?
No, and if you took it, it's the latter.
Okay. Okay.
We're almost starting from scratch.
Okay.
But I meant as part of this overall discussion.
Okay, great. Okay, good.
And of our overall discussion of us requesting additional
Okay.
waivers.
All right. That's helpful. And so I kind of envision us getting together at some point, probably an executive session in that regard, kind of discussing after we've had an opportunity to do some public input, what we would be looking for. It's hard right this minute to put a time frame on it. It really depends on what we can do and what we decide to do and what's feasible for public engagement. I think we all understand the time frame you're looking for. So we'll try to be very respectful of that, and move along deliberately.
Okay.
We did have one meeting in July, and that really set us back a bit, as opposed to 2, and we can't do a ton in between, officially.
Understood.
We can't do anything actually in between. So we appreciate the patience, but this is, as I think this is a big ask. There are a lot of opinions and a lot of nuance to it, so we just want to make sure we're respecting
No, I think
you
it's
know,
important.
getting as much input as we can. And,
It's important because, you know, we're a big footprint in the community, and we're, you know, proud of the role we play in the community. Yesterday's polls were an example, 4th of July, and so it's good to have this public discussion, and we're, you know, happy to be part of it.
yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll see you at the fair.
Okay.
I'll just find the packet again. God, this is a big packet. There it is. All right. So Ashley, you had some recommendations or findings. I don't know how you describe them from your exploration of the rubric.
So from the public participation rubric, these are basically just some suggestions based off of that level of that consult level in the public participation. Now you can obviously do more or less, whether, you know, we can look at other things, but really at this level, we are trying to get information from the community and then make a decision based off of that feedback from the community. The next level really goes into taking the recommendations from the community and inserting that into whatever we're going to do. Which again, this, as we mentioned, this isn't our project. So a lot of it is not something that we can make a lot of changes to CVE's request for us. So that was why I went to the level of consult and left it at that, again, because it's not really our job to put to make changes to CVE's request. So you have some suggestions right here for feedback. Again, these are just some that are in that level. I do think the easiest thing for us would be considering a survey and administrating that from us. We obviously have public comment already during public meetings, during the city council meetings. We could also do like a official public hearing, that's the word I'm looking for, during one of the meetings. If that was something you guys wanted to look at, that would be an opportunity for people to come and talk about that. Really, other than that, we're already doing a lot of this stuff. I don't think the stakeholder interviews or the focus groups is really the direction. Again, just because this isn't our project. It's harder to take feedback and to move those discussions when we really can't do anything. We're not going to take that feedback and it's going to affect the decision of CVE.
And we don't have a survey tool we don't have the technology with the survey tool currently and a license to do anything with.
So we use
specific
Microsoft
city
Forms.
residents. Yeah.
We use Microsoft Forms is what we use, which is what we use for our survey. It's basically like a Google form survey. It's the same kind of capabilities. People can come on there. It's not what we use for things like our applications or any type of questioning or forums that we want to get feedback from. We are using that Microsoft Forms for that capabilities. We don't have a license for anything like SurveyMonkey or any of those kind of survey tools. That would be something we could either look into a free version of that. It does have some limitations, or looking for a paid version of that.
No, I was thinking more along lines to verify residency. Not so interested in, you know, someone from St. George who has an interest in concerts and their opinion on this, to be honest. But
yeah. Other than, you know, asking for their address, that's basically, asking those kind of questions to give us your address and your name. That's the only way that we can verify that.
Okay. Any questions for Ashley, Marcus?
So, I hear you. I think, so I guess I agree on the stakeholder interviews and focus groups from the standpoint of not our project, but it may behoove us to have stakeholder conversations, and I say this from the standpoint of who do we feel that we're missing? There has been a lot of participation already, whether it's in person, whether it's been in meetings, whether it's been emails, whether it's been the engagement that CV has done on its own, or just the fact that we've put it on our agenda and people are paying attention. I'm kind of surprised that the room is empty right now, as we had so many people come out to the last meeting on this very topic. So my biggest concern is that a survey is not going to grab more people that we feel we have missed so far. So to me, it feels like if we need to have conversations with people that we feel that we're not hearing from, then we should engage those people directly in some form or fashion. But again, we've had 2 meetings on this particular topic with strong participation in the last, a lot of conversation, again, email, in person so far between then and now. So it feels like if we were to go through this again, we would be talking with the same people, getting the same comments. We're not going to get some new information unless we go directly to the people we're missing. So I don't know how to do that. And again, the complication, as acknowledged, is it's not our project, but we do have a stake and interest in this. Obviously, we have to put on the table what we're going to be willing to work with to move forward. It would also help to inform any negotiation that we're about to enter into potentially. So I think for me, it feels like we need to have the stakeholder conversation out of this list.
I don't disagree with you at all. I just wanted to, I mean, in some ways, I wanted to make sure we were doing full consideration of what we committed to do in the first place prior to this. And I feel like on this list, this is what we've been doing short of the focus groups and the stakeholder interviews, and we just talked about why that might not be appropriate here. I've heard a lot of talk about requesting a survey. I think it's a lot of work when you can't guarantee that the folks you're hearing from are your actual constituents. We don't have that set up yet. It's a long-term goal of mine, but I don't know when we'll get that. And even then, people have to consent to participate, and it does leave folks out. So in terms of who I feel like I haven't heard from, I feel like I've talked about nothing else for the past 3 months, 2 months. We have seen quite a bit of email. I have talked about this every single time I've walked the dog with at least 2 people. So that's 6 people a day on average. This is talked about at work with my city coworkers. So I feel like I would have a hard time identifying. I haven't talked to any seniors on this. And I'm trying to think of where there might be some senior residences impacted by this in one way or another.
We have received some via email.
Yeah, yes, true. I'm thinking, yeah. We've heard from, there's been conversations with rescue, there's been conversations with our public safety folks, not directly with us, but with staff and CVE. I haven't talked to anybody from the school district. We could certainly reach out and see if they have any concerns, I suppose, although I did hear from some employees privately, one way or the other. So, I don't know, Amber, do you have, I can never see you when I've got something else on the screen. Any other ideas in that regard?
Do not.
We did compile the emails we've received at CVE's request and provide them to CVE. And I can tell you from reviewing those again, it's a decent cross-section. A lot of folks I haven't spoken to before, for instance. So I think you can always do more, but I feel like we've done quite a bit. And I feel like we've heard, and I feel like, speaking for myself, if we were to come back on the 28th for an executive session to talk about what our next steps might be in a contract negotiation, I do feel like that's probably an appropriate time to do that. That does leave 2 more weeks where we can put the word out that we are seeking more input from people, and we can Ashley, maybe we can put a forms link on where people can submit their comments between now and then. Just take more opportunity to gather more comment, moderately passively, put that on a front porch forum and social or something. And as a suggestion, that's just an idea. I'm not directing you to do that, obviously. And then we come together with that information and see what we think are the next steps.
I'm sure my neighbors will appreciate it when I stop approaching them to ask.
Yeah.
Because it is, I've probably had a couple 300 conversations. Yeah. People walking their dogs, me walking up to people with dogs, you know. Yeah, anything with the dogs. No, but nobody walks their cat through the neighborhood.
Hannafords everywhere. So.
Yeah, and so there has been a tremendous amount of engagement, I feel like. And honestly, I mean, my lens is newer, but I feel like there has been a tremendous amount of feedback and outreach and conversation, and and I don't feel like we've rushed through any of this.
Okay.
So if there's an executive session at the next meeting, I think that would probably be appropriate. I'm okay with that.
I would like to add, though, that if there is a group that I would think that we might not have heard much from, it would be business owners in the Junction. I've heard from a couple, at least from what I've seen, I've heard from a couple, but I've heard from residents all over, including those that are directly next door. And, you know, again, it's an interesting mix of opinions. It's not clear cut. So, but the one group that I haven't heard a lot from is business owners. So.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out, I've heard from a bunch. I haven't heard from, I'd love to hear from more. I've heard from some that own more than one. For me, it's about weighing them. You know, weighing them against the folks that are here 24/7. And that's the difficult part for me.
It's it's not about one over the other at all. It's just agreed.
It's just weighing that feedback. You
Yeah,
know, like
exactly.
I get 15% more business when there's a concert. Okay.
Because I think one of the things that
sometimes
we've
it's hard
heard
to do something with that.
is a lot of assumptions
Right.
in some of the commentary.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, hearing from business owners would also help inform us concerning some of the assumptions that are being made in the comments that we're hearing.
Right. Yep. Well, I think that's we can put a specific call out and potentially in some of those requests or the calls to act, calls to participate. We can also be doing that ourselves as we go around town and just kind of pulling people aside and saying,
Just make an effort
introduce
over the
yourself
next
and say,
couple of
"I'm
weeks
curious
to
what you
do
think of
that,
this." You know, and making that time because we're doing it when we're walking dogs apparently. So
I can't
we
walk
do it
my
when-
dog. She's too fat and lazy.
And you can't don't bring because you probably can't bring them into the business anyway. So
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure,
Is it-
I can look into this, but I'm not sure that we have an easy,
We don't
clear
have-
way contact list of
goals.
businesses. So
Yeah.
it'd be, just tricky in terms of 2 weeks and what we can do in 2
Sure.
weeks.
Yeah, no, I think if we put that out, if we just put a sentence in whatever we're going to put out,
Yeah.
and we take the time to do it ourselves, I think. I
Okay.
guess the bottom line is, I think it seems that we all feel comfortable that we've had a wide
No.
variety of input.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and if we can quickly and easily do a forms link on the website, I think, Tim, your summary of this meeting would probably be pretty helpful. So we'll see if we can
Okay,
get that
if we
all
can do that.
together.
Yeah, I'm just thinking youth, how would we, not much of this happens. Just 3 months of this would happen while school's in session. What's the impact on a weeknight for students that walk in the evening? That kind of thing, I don't know. I think we can probably predict that just fine. So anyway, I'm reaching at this point. Ashley, did you have anything based on that conversation that you wanted to add, correct?
No, I mean, getting the feedback, we can easily set that up to put a form and put out a word that we're seeking feedback so that council can deliberate on this some more. I'm happy to do that for you guys and get that out as soon as possible. But I like the idea of you guys going out and reaching out to people. I mean, you're going to have a better conversation and get better feedback from that one-on-one conversation than anything that we would get online. So I think that's a good faith effort on behalf of the council.
Anything else on this? No?
I think that's it.
Yes, Tim. Thanks for coming back to the table.
I just want to thank you. I know you have a lot of weighty issues you're working on, and this was our request. You know, we started some discussions in spring there, but with all you're working through, I appreciate you giving the time, the thought to this topic here. It's important to us, and it's important that there's a community discussion occurring here. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Is there anyone online? There's no one else in the room here, so I'm going to go straight to Zoom. Is there anyone online that has a comment or question on this topic before we move on? Risa?
Thank you. I'm curious how CVE was given all the material that was sent to you, the discussions, the emails, et cetera. Was that part of a public records request or?
They asked for it, and so we provided it.
Interesting.
Correspondence.
Sorry,
I thought you were done. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, the council needs to make the decision, yes or no, or some semblance of something in the middle. I think that, you know, as Marcus said, assumptions are being made by everybody everywhere, as we always do. I think that there are some great things about it. I think that there are some not great things about it. You got my email. I was, you know, clear and to the point of what's in it for Essex Junction. You're making a decision that is going to affect every single person who lives here, whether it's noise, whether it's traffic, whether it's more people in the restaurants, which is a great thing for the businesses, but if we can't get into our own restaurants, not that good. CVE does a lot of good things for the state of Vermont. There is no question about that. The good things that it does for Essex Junction specifically isn't quite as obvious. So, you know, I do realize that this is a decision that is fraught with everything. No matter what you decide, some of your constituents are not going to be happy. So to that end, whatever you think you need, I strongly suggest you try and get it so that you can come to a decision that you feel good about. I agree. I don't really care what somebody in St. Albans thinks, whether they're for it or against it or whatever. It's really about Essex Junction. I also know that whenever it comes to any of these things, people are hesitant to indicate where they live, their name, whatever. They're willing to give you opinions, but not information. So, you know, I know this has gone on for a long time. I really do believe that, you know, if you're able to turn around in the shower without somebody asking you or commenting, that's pretty remarkable. So good luck. And I know you're going to do it. You're going to come to a good decision. And for everybody, I kind of hope that it's sooner rather than later, so we can move on to the next truly gigantic thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Risa. I just want to say that I'm sure there's some folks that might be surprised out there that we handed over some emails. We did sort of think of it as a public records request. Any correspondence sent us is a public record. I just want to make sure people are reminded of that. So, Cristin.
Hello. Again, so my question becomes, I agree with what Risa said, but I have a kind of a different question. What determines what ordinance gets waived and what doesn't? What makes CVE that much more special than anybody else who would want to waive an like what determines, what is the criteria to say, yes, we have this ordinance in place, but for you, we're gonna waive it? And if this goes into, if this, we find out, and this is now a question, the second question, if this, say that this goes south and, you know, we like CVE, it's wonderful, yay, we want more concerts, all that good stuff, it's fantastic. Oh, we didn't account for this impact. What happens then? Because at that point, can you reel it back in? Is this a yearly reassessment? Because if we can't really figure out the impacts now. I just want to be really careful that we're not putting ourselves into something that we can't step back out of. Last thing I'll say is a statement, not a question. I agree with everything that Risa just said in the terms of, and I also gave it to you in my email. That is so wonderful that they're going to expand. That is so wonderful. They're going to bring new acts and bigger acts to this area. I know there's a lot of love for the things they do, even though they get paid for the things that they do. It's not like, you know, they're doing it just completely heart in hand. They are getting reimbursed for the good works that they do. That being said, all the nostalgia aside, what do we get? They get to be better, bigger, they earn money, they get to be sustainable. We can't even buy the land that in our plan, when I was at the planning sessions and we all came together and it was a wonderful session and the community was like, we want to have ownership of our land and we want parks and we want green spaces and we want this and we want that. We can't even enforce the codes that and the ordinances that we have. So I appreciate the hard work that you have in front of you. I just want some long-term thinking when this happens, and for us to be a tad bit selfish, because I don't think it's that selfish to think about, well, how does this benefit us? Because it certainly will impact us.
Thank you, Cristin. Okay. See any other comments on this? Thank you, Ashley, for joining us and for hanging in there. Appreciate it. Thank you, Tim. Have a good night. Good luck with fair.
Thanks.
All right. Elaine, welcome back.
Thanks.
5F, discussion of Essex Junction participation in VLCT Welcome and Engaging Communities program. We are getting there, folks. We're getting there. Getting there.
Yeah, so we just wanted to make sure, sorry, I'm trying to find this memo.
Page 91.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some of the bookmarks are like, I don't understand why I'm looking
I
at
need to,
every
I usually
single
have the agenda open in one PDF file, just the front page, and then I can scroll on the other one, because going back and forth is like,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah, you'd think I'd be okay, because I'm working with two computers here, but, so, VLCT, Welcoming and Engaging Communities Cohort, council, essentially, I think we applied to be a part of that cohort. This last year was the second year that they've done this. And so, on the city's behalf, Raj, Colleen Dwyer, HR director, and myself participated, in the cohort. Abundant Sun is the consultant that was, working with us. And I think it was a really great program in the sense of really truly being a cohort, like sitting down with other municipalities and talking through different issues and challenges that folks are having. And everybody had sort of different kind of specific challenges going on, but really all kind of along the whole concept of discourse and communication and just like just tricky issues on how to really engage with the community and deal with really kind of challenging issues internally as well. So one component of the program also was to do a survey. And so all you folks got that. You can see in this memo here, I think, what our percentage of participation was in that survey. The survey went to all staff, all volunteers, committee members. And the data itself is sort of looked at by Abundant Sun as a statewide data set and really comparing kind of the cohort 1 and the cohort 2 and just really trying to get an idea statewide on how things are going and really how welcoming and engaging does it feel for you to live in your community and how welcoming and engaging do you feel working in the place that you're working for. Really our results showed that it's called the Net Promoter Score. There's a lot of technical terms in understanding how the data analysis and how they work with it. But essentially, in terms of a place to live, we had a great score of 26. As a place to work, not so great score of 3. So really pretty clear, and I think we know some of this already, that we've really got a lot of work to do kind of in-house and thinking through how to get to a good place. So we have got some thoughts and some thinking and trying to figure out how to move forward with this, but wanted to make sure that we just get this out there for you folks so you're aware of it.
So what are next steps?
So we are going to analyze the survey data a little bit further. Sorry, I can't get over this. And try to see if we can identify specific areas of improvement.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ask you to like read from the document. I just was a more holistic question.
So I think really trying to figure out how to engage with employees and figure out what's going on and what the issues are, because it's hard to tell sort of what's going on and who is not feeling welcome and for what reasons. So trying to just get a better sense, and we've kind of thought through a few different ways, but don't have a solid plan yet in terms of how we get that input and figure out what's next.
I'm familiar with the NPS process. It's what we use at work. And from the standpoint of breaking this down and trying to understand that feedback, are you only able to see it for the whole city? Are you able to break it down on a department by department level?
Nope.
So it's really going to be difficult then to figure out then where the feedback is coming from.
Yep.
And then try to be able to respond to department needs, because each department could be very different in how it looks at and responds to a survey like this.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's not going to be easy by any means, but I think we're an organization that has been through an awful lot of change, and over the past few years, and certainly 10 or 12 years of uncertainty, followed by an expectation that things would go one way, and then sort of a convulsive, oh, no, they're not, and they're going to go completely the opposite. And then we're adding new people, we're changing relationships we thought were solid with another entity. I think it feels to me like staff have been through a lot. And we certainly experienced that when things didn't work out with merger. That was a really rough couple months, and certainly some very difficult staff meetings. So I don't feel terribly surprised by some of this feedback. I think this, you know, there's long-term things that are going to have to be looked at. I understand I was frustrated. We couldn't, I don't think we could see the qualitative data either, right? Because they didn't want us to, specifically, they didn't want us to see that.
Yep.
And that was the most frustrating part, because that's all I wanted to see was the comments. The comments would have been too specific on an organization this small. It would have been.
And they could not summarize it with themes. I mean,
There were some
having
themes,
done
and I
this
think
with
there's
NPS myself, at least we get themes out of it, and it's broken down. I mean,
I think
heck,
we have,
I can
there's-
see my team, if my team is 5, because of the fact that at that quantitative level, you can share themes without making it personal or direct to any one person. So I'm a little surprised that we can't get a little more drilled down, because I can see some big potential gaps from one department to the next.
I think it might have something to do with setting expectations at the beginning. This was an anonymous survey for a public institution, and I think if I knew that Regina could drill down into my sub-department at work, that's got 5 people, for instance, I probably wouldn't have answered the survey. If UVM gave me that survey and said my person I'm directly reporting to would know that it's one of the 5 of us, that this is how we were all feeling generally, I would never have answered that survey.
What was the timing of
honestly,
this survey? Did it happen during association negotiations?
I believe so, because we started the program in January, right? Am I making that up? I might have the timing of the program incorrect.
This also did include, I think you're right, but this did include us, committee members, us and committee members as well, as well as staff. I'm trying to remember back to the presentation we had from them on the results.
Odds are very good that the answer to that is yes. I will find out for sure.
I mean, because generally, again, the information you're sharing here, it's like, okay, great place to live, 26. Place to work, only a 3. You have committee members and staff members. Seems like there's an inconsistency in the groups here, and then again, if you can't break it out, how do you determine how this has impacted it? And again, the timing, if it happened during the association discussion, we don't know if that impacted some of the themes or ideas or some of the feelings that they may have had at the time of completing a survey. So I have a little bit of concern over it, but I think this is important work that we need to do in order to understand our community and our staff and all that. So I'm not trying to discount that in any stretch. I just wish there was more.
Yeah, I'll go back and take a look, but I'm pretty sure the themes are by cohort, by our sort of whole group that did the surveys, but I'll go back and.
I'm trying to remember the end too. I'm trying to remember the number. We're sub 50.
So you're saying the themes are generated by all the towns that participated, but the scoring is relative to towns?
Yeah.
Okay. So the themes may not necessarily apply entirely to
Each
Essex Junction.
individual municipality, yeah. So, yeah, more to come. Definitely working on this further and trying to sort this out. I think it's just good and helpful in the sense that we've got more work to do in terms of, I think, really addressing a long time of uncertainty, a lot of newness, a lot of changing systems. There's just a lot going on.
And I think when you layer on work that I think we already need to do around, really just work we should be doing daily on ensuring we're a welcoming and engaging community, whether it be changing how we make decisions to make sure we're getting input from those that are impacted by in various populations. But I think we chose to focus internally first, recognizing that there were some areas in the house to address first, and understanding that it might be better to address those internally before we start asking those same people to do that same work externally with the community. It's not, that doesn't mean that I don't want to do that work with the community now, but I think if we want our whole organization to be engaging in that in a way that I aspire to, I think we need to make sure that they're feeling like that's the organization they work in to begin with before they can put that out to the community.
I would agree with that.
So I think I'm hoping, it's not on the list, but I'm hoping that there are some adjustments we can make to how we consider policies and how we consider ordinances and how we make decisions. Winooski's done some very interesting work on this. Other organizations, I don't think we always need to come up with a lot of communities have been doing a lot of great work, and I think we can look to them.
Winooski has some great models.
Yep, and I'm hoping that we can bring some of that here soon, or at least start talking about it. But I do really think that there's a lot of work to do internally, and I think we owe it to the folks that work here to really dig into why some of these things are coming up.
Absolutely agree with that.
We have fantastic employees doing fantastic work every single day, and it is not a great thing when you look at a survey that doesn't have stellar results and results like this. So,
well, I think what needs to be reinforced, and I think in the organization I currently work in that works with the same MPS system, and this is, we have to reinforce the message, and then we have to reinforce through our decisions that we're taking this feedback into consideration, that we are then applying and making changes. It is not going to be quick. It is not going to be necessarily like all go on one thing or anything like that, but having those incremental improvements because of the fact that we're asking the questions, receiving the feedback, make more improvements, receiving feedback. If we create that cycle and reinforce this is part of that, I think we'll see more engagement on these kinds of this kind of process, along with, because they will just understand that it is part of the cycle, that we have to have that feedback and anticipation in order for improvement to occur.
And to look at the three and appreciate what apparently is probably some pretty honest responses from how they're feeling, even if it was a given moment in time. But the worst thing we can do is not act on.
Yeah.
Even if it's not at a whirlwind pace, just to put the effort in to make it known, to show that we're doing the work, to build the relationship, to get the house in order.
I think it's also important, right, to make sure that everyone's included in doing that work.
Yep.
That they're not just seeing that they answer a survey and there's 4 people over there doing the work, and then we're gonna see what they think a year later. I think it's, although we do need to keep measuring and checking in, right? But I think one of the things I took away from this was the participation and the buy-in, and ensuring that that everyone feels like they have a role to play and input to give is key. I think we can't be doing this if we're sort of coming up with these things and then saying this is what we're going to do. these ideas and these solutions need to come from everybody. And I think it's just a really sloppy way of saying it. I wasn't gonna talk about this necessarily, but, I think it's gonna be difficult. There's gonna be there needs to be a lot of room for people to share what their issues are without fearing or worrying that it's gonna come back on them. You know, it was interesting, we did get to see samples of qualitative data in groups when this was presented to us at VLCT. In Montpelier, you know, from all 13 or whatever it was. And I have to say, you know, the thinking on some of these surveys really hit some cultural things too that were going on. It's not just necessarily, I'm not crazy about the building I'm working in, or I don't feel somebody doesn't pay attention to me enough, or it's not necessarily manager-employee issues all the time. There were a lot of cultural things that came up. There were a lot of, just us having this conversation was a problem for a lot of survey respondents. Like, we shouldn't be talking about DEI stuff. It was the gamut. It was all over the place. So there are things that were brought up in some of these responses that were larger than normal workplace.
But I think
things, because an entity like this deals with the public all the time, and there's expectations on how that's going to go, and they're probably different than other anyway.
Okay, well, we have a starting point.
Okay.
Anyone on Zoom have any comments or questions about the business item we just talked about? Welcome and engaging community work done with VLCT. I'm not seeing any hands going up, so I'll wait a minute as I go back to the beginning of from page 97 to, there we go. That's the end of the
94.
non-executive session.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So that's the end of the non-executive session business, which brings us to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Passes unanimously. Council member comments and city manager report? Do you want to go? Go for it.
I would just like to thank fire department for their work on Main Street last Friday night with a big tree that fell down and lots of different road closures and things were going on, so appreciate that. We had Rick here tonight, almost getting closer on the Crescent connector, but again, just want to reiterate appreciation for everybody's patience, especially those that have been directly impacted by the construction for the last 3 construction seasons now. And just want to remind folks that all businesses are open and to please visit them. Just want to point out 2 separate things in the reading file, and also just make a note, probably should have said this at the beginning, this packet was too enormous to be one packet. So when you go on the website, the whole reading file part is a whole separate separate PDF. So sorry about that, but we tried as we may, could not make it smaller. So in the reading file is a memo from Chris Ewan describing the Connect the Junction project. So we've talked about this project a few times now. We've referred to it before as transit-oriented development project, which means nothing to anybody, but essentially looking at the center here, Pearl Street and Park Street, really focusing on where we have good, robust bus service right now. Hopefully that can stay. And thinking through housing and business thinking in this whole area and how to do that correctly. And really would like folks to save the date for October 4th through 8th. We will be having a charrette process throughout those days, which means you kind of a ton of events within that time period that you can kind of pop in and out of during that time period. So there's that. Then also just wanted to point out that we have, thanks to the council for putting this in this year's budget, membership to CATMA, the Chittenden Area Transportation Management Association, I think, to as a benefit for staff to be able to join CATMA and just have different ways of trying to help and assist commuting in alternative ways than just driving in your car by yourself every day. So some information is in the packet, in the reading file about that as well. That's it.
I will quickly add appreciation for the new memo that it will now start to appear that is a compendium of all the other boards and agencies
Love
that are
that.
represented with links to the minutes.
That's great.
Yep.
It was very nice, thank you, and I really appreciate the community resource flyer.
Yep.
That we have, and I don't know if that's linked anywhere prominently on our website, like everything. There's only so much room on the website for prominence, but I don't know if that has a home. But
It's
that's
definitely on there.
okay. I'm sure it's there.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's under. I can almost see where it would normally be, so I'll go look later. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to what Regina said concerning the fire department, and I also want to thank just city staff in general, because it did not go unnoticed that not only were they responding to something like the tree, but, you know, we also noticed them driving around the community,
Right.
taking inventory of what was going on during that storm. And I will say, I got comments from neighbors because our portion of the block got went down. We lost power, but it went well noticed by neighbors that, again, the city staff was out there trying to make sure everyone was okay, checking in on their properties and their persons. It was a great moment, and it felt really good to be a part of the city at that time. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll second that because I believe it must have been Public Works because I saw a neighbor just sweeping the road, and he said, "Oh, they just came by and picked up all the trees," and it was still raining. I mean, it couldn't have blown down 20 minutes before.
Yeah.
So remarkable.
I have just two quick things as we approach back to school and the fair. I woke up the other morning and noticed that there is fresh paint on the crosswalks, and that can only happen in the busier intersections at night. So I want to thank Public Works for coming in overnight so that they can get the roadways painted. It's not an easy thing because they start somewhere around 7 o'clock and they go till 7 o'clock in the morning. They're probably almost done with the crosswalks at this point, which means they'll move on to the 4-inch lines, and hopefully it'll alleviate some of the traffic trying to turn left into the Lincoln Inn on Park Street, which causes a backup, which might screw up the eye that's being installed. Anyway.
Oh boy.
The second one is I wanted to extend a note to my wife. It is my 20th wedding anniversary this evening. And so you guys have had to put up with me for a few months, and you extrapolate that out to 20 years. And so I just wanted to take a minute and wish her a happy 20th anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
She's
And
an
you're
angel.
welcome. You're welcome that we kept him tonight.
She didn't want to listen in on the meeting.
All right. What page is the? There it is. Zoom in. So we have two sets
Motions.
of motions.
I have the first one in
Go
front of
for
me. I move that the city council make the specific finding that premature disclosure of the contractual matters would place the city at a substantial disadvantage. I move that the city council enter into executive session to discuss a contract pursuant to 1 VSA 313 A1A to include the city council and city manager.
Second. Okay.
Do you want me to read the other one, or do you want to do one at a time?
Oh. Go ahead and read the other one too.
I move that the city council enter into executive session to discuss the personnel evaluation pursuant to 1 VSA 313 to include the city council.
And the manager. Can you mind amending that?
That will be acceptable.
Okay. I'll second that as well. Oh, it's my turn. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Amber said aye. We are in executive session. Okay, we're back in session. I am going to make a motion. I move the council authorize the city manager to execute a contract with the Essex Junction Employee Association for 2024 to 2027.
I'll second.
Great. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. I move the city council adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Recording stopped. I was gonna say thank you to the manager and to the staff who